Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's or strategic planning session, I guess, officially. So it is a special council meeting. I will remind everyone that the session is also being live streamed. And Dave, did you want to talk again? Because you're on. Oh, okay. There we go. You keep turning yourself on.
There we go.
And so the session is live streamed, just so everybody is aware of that. We have three colleagues who are away and therefore aren't here for this session. We will be providing. I'm going to try to capture as much as I can some of the things they shared with me during our one-on-one meetings, but we'll also have an opportunity at the December strategic planning session to have some further input into what we're discussing today. Today's focus will be on a presentation from staff with respect to our strategic planning and business planning process, and then an opportunity for us to provide input into that, primarily for the coming year of the work plan. So the idea is that any stuff that we really want to see added to the work plan for 2015, we'll be providing input into today and in the December meeting. Later this year, we'll be having additional sessions that will inform the 2016 to 2018 work plan, or 2016 to 2019 work plan. And so that we'll be doing later this year. So today's focus will be primarily on the coming year, so that it can also help inform the 2015 budget. But before we get going, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wilmer, who'd like to introduce a new staff person. Mr. Wilmer.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to introduce to Council Dev Tiegi. Dev is right here sitting next to Michael, and Dev will be starting on December 8th as the Deputy CAO in charge of Infrastructure Services. Although he doesn't start for another few weeks, he was good enough to make himself available today and tomorrow excuse me, as part of the orientation sessions and council sessions, so that he's being oriented at the same time as the new councillors and the returning councillors go through these sessions. So we're very pleased that he's joining our team. He brings with him quite a bit of experience at a department head level from large Ontario municipalities in a number of different areas, all relating to infrastructure. And so we're very pleased with that. He's a good complement to the team and has a good history of bringing about the type of change that this organization and this council is looking for. So we welcome Dev, and I'm sure you'll get a chance to meet him and say hello over the next couple of days.
Wonderful. And Dev, did you want to say anything, or I'll turn on your... There you go. Oops. Just one sec. Oh, hold on. I'll hang on here. And there you go. You're on.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Your Worship. Thanks, Jeff, for that introduction. Your Worship, members of Council, I'm really looking forward to joining the staff here. From every research I have done, City of Kitchener is really very well run, and I look forward to joining the team, which is quite effective as it is, and hopefully we can serve the citizens of Kitchener even better. And that's my commitment, that I think the reason we exist as an organization is to provide services to the public, the taxpayers, and make sure their interests are taken into account. Thank
Excellent.
you again, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to working with the team and the mayor and the council.
Excellent. Well, welcome. We're certainly happy to have you joining the team. I know I've spoken with the members of council that were on the selection committee, and they had many positive things to say about you. So we're certainly looking forward to you coming on board and continuing on in building that part of our operations, because it is one that is near and dear, I know, to all members of council. It certainly is one that everyone expressed hope to see us continue to do some great work for our citizens on. So welcome, and look forward to meeting with you in the coming days.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, so with that, over to you, Mr. Wilmer, to introduce things.
Thanks very much again. So just to give a very brief sort of high-level overview of the strategic planning process and the business planning process and how they relate. So as councillors and councillors-elect will be aware, the new strategic plan is a work in progress. That's starting with the Environics survey about a year ago now, and the Your Kitchener, Your Say campaign throughout the spring. Staff and Compass Kitchener worked together to develop strategic priorities that were tabled in public in September, and those will form the basis of the next strategic plan. So that is still very much a work in progress, and the new council will be considering that, having input to it, and is scheduled to approve that by June of next year. So the new business plan that will follow that, implementing the first year of the new strategic plan, will be about a year from now. So December of 2015, you'll receive a new business plan looking forward and into the new term of council. So the purpose of today really is to get your input towards the 2015 business plan. It's actually the last year of implementing the current strategic plan. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to connect with council because you've just come through an election campaign, you've heard from the community. That community input, the all candidates debates and so on, were all done with the knowledge of the community priority or strategic priorities that were tabled in September. And we thought this is a great opportunity before we table a new business plan for 2015 is to get your input towards that. And so Lori and Jen will facilitate that session today. And it's really, so for today we really are focused on just the calendar year 2015 and getting input, and then we'll take that back, get your prioritization on it, and that'll be the subject of discussions in January and February, leading up to budget approval in late February. So all of that just sort of overview before we pass it over to Lori.
Okay, good morning.
Wonderful. Good morning, Lori.
For any of you that don't know me, and Dave might be the only one, I'm Lori Major, and I'm the Manager of Strategy and Business Planning. And Jennifer Groove is our Corporate Planning Analyst, and she'll be writing down your ideas today on the flip charts and helping out with this session. So good morning. I'll begin this session today with a brief introduction and overview of the strategic and business planning processes. And time has been allowed for some questions on that. This is a constantly evolving process, so there may be some new things that you haven't seen before, things you'd like more clarification on. So that whole process with questions and answers shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. The primary purpose of this session today is for idea generation and the discussion of your ideas as potential projects for the organization to undertake in 2015. And we've allowed 3 hours for that. 90 minutes before the lunch break to focus on 3 of the areas of strategic focus from the community priorities, and 90 minutes following the lunch break for the remaining 3. So as I've mentioned, Jennifer will record your ideas as they come up so you can see them. If you have trouble sort of seeing what she's writing, you can certainly ask and we can confirm what we've captured in terms of your ideas. So I'll start with the overview and context. So the purpose of the strategic plan is to set the direction for the city at the beginning of each new term of council. The priorities, goals, and strategies included in the plan help to guide budget decisions, policy decisions, and business plans that help us to manage the work of the organization in achieving those goals. There are 3 basic criteria a strategic plan must meet for it to be a useful guide for these types of decisions. The goals within the plan must be valued by the community, achievable by the organization, and relevant to council. For this reason, the process of developing the strategic plan includes steps that involves collaboration and input from all 3 components, the community, the council, as well as city staff. So with this approach, it's in keeping with the vision for the City of Kitchener from the Plan for a Healthy Kitchener, the 20-year vision for the city, which is together we'll build an innovative, caring, and vibrant Kitchener with safe and thriving neighborhoods. So this diagram really shows the relationship between, the three areas, which is the community, council, and staff, and our responsibilities to each other 2 ways. So in order to achieve this objective, the strategic planning process has been designed in 4 phases. The first is the community assessment phase, Second, environmental scan. Third, the development of strategic options. And finally, the confirmation of direction that will come with council approval expected in June 2015. To date, we have completed the community assessment phase with the report on community priorities and strategic directions shared with council on September 15th. This report was the result of extensive community engagement campaign led by Compass Kitchener Citizens Advisory Committee, and it resulted in 6 strategic directions and 28 community priorities for the next 4 years. And I think you all should have copies of those in as an appendix to the report that came with today's agenda. And that's really will be the focus for the discussion around those things. So the business plan is really the way of putting the strategic plan into action. By allocating resources from across the organization and ensuring there's adequate support from those areas like information technology and communications and marketing, as well as others, it helps us manage towards those goals, and constantly monitoring helps us keep those initiatives on track and ensure that we follow through. So on Monday, there was a status update that was delivered to council on the progress of projects that are on the current business plan. And so we do that 3 times a year to council as well as to the public. So the business plan is an essential management tool for the organization. It gives us a comprehensive blueprint for all our work and includes both core service and projects. And in the process of developing the business plan, we have to really think very carefully about balancing the resources that are required to deliver on the day-to-day expectations of the community for core service, and the things that we can do in addition to that. So projects that go on the business plan. Because it's a document that's shared throughout the organization and all directors are involved, there is a consistent and clear sense of the priorities, and the work is coordinated as we move forward. So the business plan includes a departmental overview for each of the 4 departments. There are 47 core services that we introduced into the business plan for the first time this year in 2014. It also includes corporate projects, which are monitored on a more frequent basis and are prioritized as those things that the whole organization is focused on, as well as divisional projects that move forward, monitored on a less frequent basis by CLT and the corporate management team. And the budget impacts of each department are also included, and that's broken down by division for the most part. So if you all have your business plan, copy of the current business plan in the binder that you were provided, you'll see those things in there. So this is a very useful document, not just for council, but also for the public. The core service profiles give a lot of valuable information in terms of what the city does and where the money goes generally. Each core service demonstrates divisional accountability. The number of positions that support that service are in there, the key functions. The capacity indicator, which is in the red circle on the top right-hand corner, gives an idea of what percentage of the staff in that service their capacity is required to support the day-to-day operation of that service. So it gives us an idea of how much capacity they have to take on additional work and special projects, and to be involved and support the projects that are being led by others. There are some workload indicators for each core service as well, which are in the boxes on the lower right-hand corner, as well as each director with their divisions have identified significant trends and challenges for that service, so you get an idea of what things are coming up and the types of issues they need to manage, and those things often lead to projects that end up on the project side of the business plan. So the other key part of the business plan is the projects, and they're organized by division, so there's accountability for the directors for completing the projects that are on their business plan. It identifies corporate projects, divisional projects, and throughout the year we will add new initiatives, which are things that are identified by council that are urgent and priorities, and the timing is important, so they can't be delayed. So we do add those into the business plan as we go through the monitoring process, as well as the schedule in terms of the timing of those projects. Some are single-year projects, others multiple-year. And we do connect each project to the strategic plan through the strategic alignment linkage that's on the right, in the right-hand column of the projects. So I know it's an awful lot of information in one document, but I think that's one of the benefits of it, is that it does support transparency and accountability for the organization, provides high-level information on all city services in a single document. The projects demonstrate a commitment to the priorities of the organization, the initiatives that we're taking on to move forward on those, and progress is reported publicly 3 times a year. So the projects get a lot of focus and discussion. These are the new interesting things that move the organization forward. And as I mentioned, we have corporate, divisional, and new initiatives. These are the things that usually end up in the media and some of the new innovative things that the city is doing. But in comparison, core services make up a much more significant component of the work of the organization. They are sometimes, just not as visible or maybe not as interesting, because it's the idea of maintaining the expectations that the citizens have come to expect. But when we compare them, 94% of the capacity of the organization is committed to core service, at least based on our current business plan, and that leaves about 6% for doing corporate divisional projects and new initiatives. So it's just to put some perspective on what we have available within our current budget constraints to take on new projects. So for our capacity for projects, again, this slide really just goes into a little more depth. The 6% involve critical projects required to sustain the organization, so that may be things like software upgrades and hardware upgrades, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of city services. Those are the things that help us stay within the tax rate that is approved, and respond to strategic priorities and other council directives. So those are the things that typically go on the business plan or are included in divisional work plans as well. So far, in the past 2 or 3 years that we've been monitoring the business plan, as an organization, we're able to complete 10 to 12 corporate projects and about 50 to 60 divisional projects each year. So really, to sum up, what we've learned is that we certainly can't do everything. There are needs and expectations in the community and within the organization that go beyond what we have the capacity to do. So for that reason, prioritizing is critical, and we will be asking you to prioritize the ideas that come from today's session as well. Good project management helps everyone stay on track, so including it in the business plan certainly is a good way for us to manage and monitor the progress of those things. And just on a final note, unanticipated new projects do create delays and disruption in our planned projects. So it is a lot better for us and for the organization to look ahead and see what might be coming. And that's the purpose of the discussion today, is get those things identified up front so that we can plan for them, build them into the plan, understand where they fit in terms of priorities, so that we can move forward smoothly over the following year. So that's the completion of my overview. So are there any questions for clarification before we move into the discussion?
Okay, looks like we have a few. Thanks for that presentation, Lori. Can we make sure that council gets circulated afterwards with the slideshow, if they haven't been already?
If I could just ask something. I have a hearing impairment, and the hearing device not working today, so I don't... Is it all right if I
just absolutely.
Sit on the horseshoe there so I can hear your questions, and I'll respond from there?
No worries at all there. There we go. We got you on, so you're good there?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Laurie. I confess to not having looked as in-depth as I probably should have before this meeting on this business plan. I find it interesting that we've got some room for additional projects when I look at the 95% or the 85% of core services. I like that idea so that we have a sense, but it does concern me that we don't have... Does this, maybe my question should be, does this mean that we don't have very much flexibility to take on new initiatives or to maybe realign the strategic initiatives that we already have?
And if you can just leave your mic on the whole time, Lori, that'd be
But I
great.
can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear if you don't do that. Okay, no worries.
Okay. So far, we've been able to do some really great things and take on some exciting work. There are definitely some projects that we can't do because we just don't have the resources, or projects that get deferred or delayed because we have to prioritize and focus on those most important things. So I would really be, looking to council for that direction, and that's why prioritizing is so important, that we focus on the most important things. But if you feel that there's things that are important that we don't have the capacity to do that, maybe when we need to start looking at issue papers for, either consulting resources or new staff so that we can accomplish more as an organization. Of course, we do look at efficiencies every year, through the audit program and the service reviews to see how we can find new capacity to commit to this. But it is a challenge, but I think so far, in my opinion, I think we've done very well.
Okay. I guess my other question then would be, is there areas that we need to identify right up front that projects that you've already seen that we've needed to defer, or that we definitely can't take on? Or as we're discussing this, maybe those items should be identified immediately and say, well, that sounds really wonderful, but this is where we see the challenges of moving forward on a project like that.
And that is my understanding of where the issue papers come in, when that comes through the budget process, when we're requesting additional resources tied to specific initiatives. And there are a number that staff have already identified that without resources approved through the budget that we won't be able to move forward on. So as we bring the draft business plan forward, once we've incorporated your ideas, we'll certainly highlight those things for you, and then you can decide.
Okay. One other question is, as I've been looking through the vast amount of volunteers who have put forward their applications for all the different committees that we have, are we taking, and maybe maybe you're not the right person to be asking the question of, but it came to me to think that we've got this vast amount of people who are willing to volunteer on all these advisory committees. Are we maybe not tapping into that as a resource? Because there are times when the advisory committee, and I'll be specific, the environmental advisory committee often doesn't feel like we are able to move anything more forward. We're just getting, lame issues, I guess, was the comment I heard from one of the environmental committee members that is not returning, because they said, I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I'm just sitting here listening. I really want to be a part of moving projects forward and moving initiatives forward, or making motions that have some value at council and at committee. So is that an area that maybe we should be looking at? I'll just leave it out there.
In my opinion, certainly we look at all opportunities, to leverage resources that are available through partnerships, volunteers, the community, and where there are those opportunities, we do try to take advantage of those. Mm-hmm. I think there may be potential to do more of that, so it is something that we could certainly look at. Sometimes what we need to move projects forward is expertise, and so there's specific skills or credentials that we need access to that to move things forward. So that sometimes can be a bottleneck, but certainly volunteers and citizen commitment, and that opportunity is valued as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wilmer, you wanted to add to that?
Just a brief comment. The overall intent for today really was to have a brainstorming session and just to gather ideas. We really didn't feel it would be the appropriate forum to talk about prioritizing until we have all those ideas, or to debate maybe a good idea, but we don't have the resources for it. That will happen between now and December 8th and at the December 8th advisory standing committee meeting. That's when we'll have everything on the table. We'll be able to map out the resource allocations. So for today, it's really an open forum, brainstorming session, gathering in your ideas, and then we'll that's all grist for the mill, and that's what will inform the next couple of months. So one thing we do know, and Laurie has already said it, is we don't have resources to do everything, but let's get all the ideas, and then we'll work out with you what are the priorities.
I think the only other point that maybe I'll add, specifically with respect to the issue that Councillor Fernandez has raised, I think, if the mandates of the committees is something that you want looked at, then that would be an issue to bring forward as something to add to the work plan, either the work plan of the committees or the work plan of Compass Kitchener as an example, because the committees have generally been designed in a way to either advise staff or council on initiatives that staff and council bring forward, or to advise on ideas that they think the city should be looking at. They haven't been designed to necessarily be, get your hands dirty, action-oriented committees. And that maybe is a matter of a broader discussion if we were going to go in that direction. So hopefully you find that helpful. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Wilmer has already given us some guidance as to what the focus of today is, but still wanted to make sure that I take an opportunity to kind of carry on a little bit of what Councillor Fernandez was saying early on, in ensuring that there's still sufficient room to allocate resources to unexpected items. And the reason why I say this is it's kind of difficult for me because I've sat around this horseshoe speaking about efficiencies, and long-term priority setting for the community isn't always efficient because you don't know what the priorities will be in another 2, 3, 5 years from now. And speaking of that, so that's why I'm saying, especially when it comes down to a very micro level, not even a citywide perspective, what issues arise in a ward-specific capacity where, this is something that wasn't anticipated, or we had never realized that this is something that the city would have to deal with. Part of the planning is not necessary to allocate or set aside a certain amount of resource and saying, this is something that's there that we're not going to say that we're going to prioritize anything as for the 6%, as where council will have opportunity apart from the 94% core services. 1 or 2%, I'm not saying what the number should be, or even if that's possible to set or allocate, but still take into account that they are things that will arise that's outside our focus or perspective, and make sure that the resources are always there to be able to effectively and reasonably be able to, tackle those. So anyways, it's more of a comment than a question because you've pretty much answered Councillor Fernandez's through her questions beforehand. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor-elect Marsh.
Thank you. First of all, Laurie, I think you need to be commended for the excellent layout of this business plan. It's extremely well designed and easy to read, and I like how much information you were able to get on one page. I just wanted to address, my mind is on similar things to Councillor Singh and Fernandez, just regarding this percentage. I think the percentages at the top right-hand side of the pages, I would just suggest that those are not actually static numbers. I don't think that you can come up with an exact percentage that this workload represents, in terms of core services. Probably we need to just make sure that as we're going forward and looking at potential projects and putting all our ideas out on the table, I don't think that we need to be too worried about those numbers yet, because they're not static, and they're they're bound to, fluctuate, and they represent quite a lot of number of people on the staff that I know are working very hard, and probably as we try and add more and more to their workloads, they're feeling like, well, I want to do it, but I can't do it all. But we're going to need to just keep in mind that those numbers will change, can they not?
The numbers are, they're really a best guess, right? Because they're not based on a scientific calculation. They're sort of a generalization of where the resources go. The numbers, the percent that's available, that's required to support core service, I would say generally over time will probably go up instead of down, because, as services, there's challenges just in managing and maintaining services. And our first priority is to deliver consistent, reliable service to the community, and so that number represents what the director feels it would take to do that with the resources that they have. They may go down by a few points if we can find efficiencies. If we reduce service levels, they can go down, but they're not. There is an awful lot of work involved in delivering the core services. So I wouldn't want you to think that that can sway by as much as 10 or 20%. There probably is some room, and we do our best to make the most of the resources that we have.
Okay. I think at this point that looks like all the questions. So I guess we'll turn it back over to you to start going through section by section.
Okay, so I'll hand it over to you to facilitate the discussion. We are asking a single question, really, which is, what is the one thing you believe should be a priority for the city to take action on in 2015, knowing that we will have a more fulsome strategic plan and business plan next year. So we've broken it into two parts, and for this 90-minute segment, and actually I think I'm probably down to 70 minutes now, we'd like to focus on the first three community priorities, just as a way of focusing your discussion and your ideas. And those are government, the economy, and the environment. And you should have in your package the actual specific priorities that came from the community, but certainly we're open to other suggestions as well that go beyond that. So I'll hand it over to you for the discussion, and Jennifer will record your notes, and if you'd like us to feed that back to you at any time, just so you're clear on what we've recorded, we're willing to do that.
Okay, great. Well, I will. I have a couple of people who are already in the queue that'd like to raise some initiatives under this section. So we'll start with that and go through section by section. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Sorry, just to be clear, are we just doing number 1, or are we doing 1, 2, and 3?
We're just doing number 1. So we'll
Number
do
one,
government
perfect.
first, then we'll move on to economy, then we'll move on to the environment.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to be clear. I'll be the first to break the rule because I have more than one thing to to talk about. But I don't think any of them are, well, these ones anyways are too onerous that my ideas will take up a whole lot of time. But
And again, I just want to remind everyone that if we can focus on the 2015 priorities, if you mention something else, I mean, staff may note it for consideration for 2016 to 19, but you'll have other opportunities later in the year to provide input into that.
yeah, and I really think that I tried to keep the thoughts and what I've heard into what I believe we can do within the next year. And some of it I may be wishful thinking, but I'm open to having that debate with council and staff in the coming months. So with government, I think one of the things that we continue to hear about from citizens and around this horseshoe is really around community engagement. And I think we really need to take a hard look at community engagement, how we do it, not just from a PIC, but overall, really how do we engage the community and how can we better do that? Looking at best practices and ways to continue to engage the community. So I think it's something that we already have in place, but I think it really needs a review and a revamp. And I think we continue to hear from the community with regards to that. And the other one I have for government, And it may fall under one of the others, but I'm going to bring it up now, and if it should be under one of the other numbers, I'm amenable to looking at that. But is bylaw resources, and I look at it from a perspective of being a responsive government. I think what we're doing is we're putting a lot of bylaws in place, especially around the neighborhood type bylaws, and we're not able to be responsive. And so I think we need to do a review on resources, really at the end of the day is what it's going to be, and whether or not we need new resources in order to effectively enforce the bylaws that we are putting in place. I think we continue to hear, or I continue to hear from the community that why are we putting no parking by school zones, yet we have no one out there to enforce. So they'll see a bylaw officer there, and then they won't park there that day, but tomorrow they won't see a bylaw officer there, and they'll park. So our rules aren't really being able to be enforced if we don't have the resources to enforce them. So I think that it may already kind of be underway, but I really do think we need to hammer that out in the next year in order for us to be able to move forward with the budget resources that we potentially will need. So those are my two for government.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I definitely have some for economy, but we're going through one by one, correct?
Yes.
Okay. For government, I think we're actually already on a pretty good path with respect to our policies with transparency. I do think not necessarily a new priority, but it's already in the works, working with mobile technology to ensure some of the things actually that Councillor Galloway-Seelock is concerned about I share. And I think we need to leverage mobile technology to increase productivity per worker as opposed to adding some more staff in that respect. The only other thing I would touch upon is the engagement piece, and it's very, very important, but I continue to be concerned about the method that we get citizen feedback. I'm not sure if this is something that we can ever implement, possibly this year, but when we're getting feedback on specific items such as, I'll throw one out there, our sponsorship strategy. I have concerns when it's non-statistically significant surveys, like when it's simple public input, someone emails or someone fills out a survey, because obviously we all know that depending on the issue, it will tend to skew one segment of the community, and whether it's someone that's particularly opposed or in favor. And I think that we would get very different results in terms of community engagement if we were to find a way to make those numbers even remotely more statistically significant going forward. So those are really my concerns when it comes to community engagement and transparency.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, and same as earlier two comments. It's a little difficult to prioritize this to one, so I'll take a little latitude and extend it to two as well. And it speaks to, in the same line as both Councillor Davey and Councillor Galloway-Seelock has said, engagement is absolutely essential for good governance. And but I like to kind of focus and narrow into youth engagement. This is something that the city has taken the necessary steps, but as a priority that needs to carry forward into 2015, I think in creation of a strong community and society, the youth that will be the future leaders and citizens of the city, they need to have a strong understanding as to how city government works, what the priority, the issues of the community and the city are, and that in itself will enable us to have a strong, engaged pool of citizens in the future. So that needs to carry forward. And the other is, of course, customer service, similar to what Councillor Davey has said, that we need to, for efficiency, utilize technology to the best of capacity. I think that saves significant costs. And at the same time, I think, and this is something also, we are moving in this direction, and I'm pleased to see, and again, needs to carry forward in 2015 as a priority, is customer service. Strong customer service. And I think we need to, apart from just ensuring that we have good customer service, we need to also ensure that there are certain checks and balances, taking into account that when citizens have concerns or issues or even problems as they deal with our staff or through different departments, that themselves can be addressed, and seeing how we can change that going forward. So engagement, more specific to youth, customer service, more specific to positive experience of customer service with their citizens.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. There's a reoccurring theme already, I hear. Engagement, engagement, engagement. And even though we engage a lot, we are always seeming to engage with the same squeaky wheels. I think part of our struggle, and this is what I heard at the door a lot, is why the heck should I vote? You don't even bother to listen to me. So my second question always was, well, have you gone to the website? Have you attended? Have you come to the meet and greet that I have had at the community center? What are your concerns? And it always surprised me when I ended up with this sort of blank look on their face, or they would go into a tirade. But it seems to be a piece missing, and I don't think it's that we're not doing it. It's that they are not getting it. And folks who are watching us live streamed, I'm not attacking you as a resident, but if you want engagement, you have to come to us. We are your counselors. You have to pick up the phone and call us and tell us what your problem is and what your concern is. You have to email us because we are your representatives. And I think that's where there seems to be a disconnect. I know that Lori and her team were out everywhere talking to people, and many of us were out there, watching in dismay at some of the lack of attendance. So it's not that we're not doing it; it's just that sometimes there seems to be that disconnect between what we're doing and what people are actually telling us. So how do we bridge that? And I think that some of us as councillors need to be out there in the community, whether it's at the grocery store, at the community center, walking the trails, just be visible. And maybe that's our challenge and not necessarily the corporation's challenge. One of the things that I have struggled with for many years is how we do our public information sessions. I know that different departments do it different ways. I know engineering follows the plan of the boards around the room. Planning often does sort of a presentation and then a Q&A, which I really like. And I've heard that when we had a particular issue in my ward, how that was very well addressed and how the community at large felt they were listened to. And the developer did listen to them and staff did listen to them. So I think that there are certain departments within our organization that if we're doing a public information session, need to look at how the citizens can feel like they're listened to. If you do the boards around the room, this is what I hear. It's divide and conquer. That's why you're doing this. It's divide and conquer. You don't want to really listen to our questions because I'm asking a question at Board A and it's exactly the same question that my neighbor's going to ask at Board A, and then nobody hears the answer. So I think that may be a really important component that we need to look at how we do our public information sessions. There were lots of other really good ideas from the rest of my fellow colleagues.
Thanks, Councillor Fernandez. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, through you, Chairperson Urbanovic. I guess for me, the question is, we hear about transparency, you hear about engaging public and all that, but the reality is, they're only going to accept what they want to take from you. So I know we've all knocked on doors and some people look at you and say, get lost. So if they're not willing to accept it, then we're not going to be able to solve this problem. So I think overall, we pretty well have a pretty decent program involved with transparency and all that. That information's all out there. I think the real message should be what differentiates us from the region and the city. I think that's the message that needs to be more clear. And I think that will create more efficiencies for us. And that's the part where you get that disengagement, because I think a lot of the folks that when I was knocking on doors would be talking about regional issues. And some of them who were upset wouldn't even want to talk to you. because it was a regional issue. So I think that's a thing that we need to wrap around, and how we can differentiate ourselves from the region and the city in the sense on core services, what's being delivered. I also think that this is on maybe some of those services that we do provide. Maybe, for instance, like one of the things that you hear often in the wintertime is, why is my street not plowed? Well, maybe it's as simple as providing a radio ad and putting in there and saying, listen, if you live on a cul-de-sac, your street's not going to be plowed until whatever, 2 days from now, depending on the amount of snow that falls and if it's consistently falling. I think that those are the kind of things that we need to get involved with more and put that message out more and more. And but I think this is just the transparency thing, the accountability thing. I think we're all there. This is live stream. Like, I mean, it's all here. The information's there. We're doing the best we can, and I think we just need to differentiate ourselves more, and that's where I think is where we would save a lot of time and money. And I don't know about you guys, but I know probably 50% of the phone calls that I receive are regional issues.
So, Councillor Ioannidis, on that last point that you were just raising, I think what you're suggesting is that we need to perhaps look at how we communicate proactively, and maybe using some different methods, whether it's radio ads or, I mean, there's always, looking at the various options. Okay, just so that it gets captured. Councillor-elect Schneider.
Thank you. One of the things that came up at a public information meeting that I was at was the language that we use.
Sorry, the which?
The language that we use.
Yep.
His comment was, look, I'm a common man. I don't understand all this governmental language. So maybe if we have a more citizen-friendly language in some of our reports where they can understand things easier, brevity, clearer wording for them. And the other comment that came up was, after this meeting, they made their comments. They said the comments were being taken into consideration, but is there a way that we can follow up where they can see that their information, that their comments were written down and they are on record?
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. We'll take note of that. Thank you. Councillor-elect Marsh.
Yeah, so to your point, Councillor-elect Schneider, I don't think there is a one-stop place where we can find out, what citizen surveys or any kind of engagement, what the results were, like what people said, and then what the final decision was. But I would really love to see that we close the feedback loop. I think that one of the points that came out of the study that we're looking at, the Environics and Your Kitchener, Your Say, was to have more open and transparent decision making and explain how decisions are made and the rationale for key decisions. So if we include citizen feedback in, maybe it would be a web-based, format, so that we could say, here's the decision, here's the feedback that we received, and this is what, this is why we made this decision. I think that would be wonderful and go a long way to help with engagement. I also think that just as a small potential initiative that we could do in 2015 would be to focus on the problems that arise during the election period, just with to focus on voter turnout and how we might improve the processes. So more signage, on election day at all the voter locations. More, there's a certain amount of feedback that I personally have received, and I know that probably all of us have received, and the clerk's office as well, so that we could, compile that feedback and make sure that we act on it for next time.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple people that want to come in a second time. Before we do that, I'm going to try to capture some things that have been raised by our colleagues who aren't here. And then I'll go around a second time and then add my own at the end. From Councillor Etherington, he raised issues around voter turnout polls, the need to do sort of a post-election review, which I believe is part of staff's process and will be coming back. But I just want to identify that because that's probably something that should happen in the first year while it's fresh in people's minds. From Councillor Gazola's stuff didn't fall into that section, and Councillor Yanetsky also raised issues around the voting process, and I think that would be it for the government side of things. So we'll now go around for a second time, just being cognizant on time, and then I'll add mine. Councillor Singh.
Yes, just very quickly, something that was said earlier about this council being the most effective way or medium for engagement with our citizens, as we are the representatives of the people. And I think that's something that needs to be a focus and a priority into next year, that more tools need to be made available to council. And I'm not sure if the resources that are already available to us are properly, effectively laid out in a way or as friendly. So either that needs to be something that needs to be relooked at, or definitely we need to make sure that there is more at our disposal, that we can be more effective in representing the people.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez.
I have a question of Councillor Singh. What do you mean by tools? Like, what are you referring to in terms of, because that's pretty ambiguous.
Go ahead, Councillor Singh.
Councillor Fernandez, so as to how we have our public meetings as councillors in the various community centres, different ways that we can try to engage with the people, connect with the people, resources we have available to be able to send out notices to people. Councillor Fernandez, last year my wife and I have to give her half the credit, walked and delivered 1,200 notices to make sure that we got the proper feedback for Big Music Fest, post Big Music Fest. This was not a priority or a resource that was laid out, so I took it upon myself. But there's only a certain extent that a person can do, and of course, I personally would want to do much more, but those are the things that I'm saying that needs to be more available to us as a resource tool in being able to facilitate better meetings, being able to engage our neighborhood associations better, assist them in their functions in the community. So it's it is an ambiguous topic, but there is a lot that can be done, and I think this is the beginning of that conversation. That's not necessarily me laying out every piece of what it should be.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the clarification. My suggestion was actually a bit more, even more detailed, because once I was listening to Sarah, I'm going to go by first name, just for quickness. The opportunity to complete that loop, I think we have two very quick and easy responses that we could use. Not responses, but sorry, I can't think of the word. Your Kitchener is a newspaper that we insert, that we have in the Kitchener Your Kitchener in the Citizen. Often it's full of lots of little bits and pieces of information, but here's an opportunity to take a full page and say, this is what we were dealing with, this was your input, this is what we're going to do about it. So that whole loop is laid out very clearly for anybody to read, and then do the same on our website, and do the same at every community center, neighborhood association. They would get that sheet. This is what we did for the Your Kitchener, Your Say, and the whole thing, but very clearly, very briefly, bullet points people can read and take away and say, hey, this is what happened. This is how that loop was closed. The Leisure magazine is another opportunity. I know it's chock-a-block full of information about registrations, but why not have a full-page in that as well as this is how we deal with community engagement. These were your questions. It doesn't have to be covering the entire Your Kitchener, Your Say, for example, but take out one section that seems to be heard over and over and over again. Traffic and speeding, for example. Talk about that on one whole page. That's it, nothing else. I think that is one very simple way that we can get information out to people, and they may actually stick it on their refrigerator and say, oh, this is how they deal with traffic. This is how they deal with community centers. This is how they deal with whatever. So.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fernandez. Councillor-elect Marsh.
Right. So thank you. So just to clarify, Councillor Fernandez, I didn't mean just for Your Kitchener, Your Say that we should have something to close the feedback loop. That's just once every 4 years, right? This would be an ongoing thing because we have multiple consultations every year. Right. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So a couple things that I'd like to see included in there this year under the government section. One of them is just something that staff are all already do on an annual basis, but that's looking at our expenses as they occur over the course of the year, and as people file them, that they would actually get posted on the website as they occur during the course of the year. So I'd like to see how that can happen. Secondly, there's the notion of, and I know members of council have talked about this before, but the idea that on any tax-funded trips funded by the city, that we actually look at submitting a 1 or 2 page report that would be part of it and shared with other members of council so that they have that information available to them. And finally, and this fits in with the citizen engagement piece, is looking at new ways and using technology to help with it, but looking at starting quarterly town hall meetings that would involve the mayor and some councillors doing a rotation, but it would be a way of engaging the community in new ways, going to the citizens as opposed to expecting them to come to us, and doing it in ways that are convenient to them. There'd be a small cost associated with it, but actually it would work, I think, quite effectively. So those are some of the things I'd like to see looked at at least for the coming year. Okay, I'll go around one last time quickly, but we need to move on to the next issue. Councillor-elect Schneider.
Just a question to Councillor Singh's point about engagement tool costs. This is just a question, would that come out of our office budget, or is that out of another fund?
Right now, any of that stuff comes out of the global mayor and council's office budget.
Thank you.
And there's a certain amount allocated to mailings for that purpose. Councillor Davey.
Sorry, just a quick note and something that would fall under transparent and accountable government. An issue, again, going door to door, which touches upon a couple other comments with respect to the division between the regional and the municipal level is I would like to see, and this is probably something that could be implemented in 2015, all future publications in terms of tax bills. I would really like to see them broken out by the regional portion of taxes, the city portion of taxes, and school board, because there are often times that people are confused. They don't know the level of taxation on their property that is paid to the lower tier municipality, and yet we're attributed for those taxes. So going forward, if on all of those bills, if that's something we could do, I think that would help in terms of transparency.
That's fine, but I think it's actually already done that way. Mr. Chapman, can you clarify?
Through you, Chair Urbanovic, there is a basic breakdown of city, regional, and education, Chair, but I know one of the community priorities, and I'll just read it, was to provide more information on city spending, explaining why decisions are made, and communicate in a way that's understood. So right now, I don't know that a breakdown of tax rates, buried in the tax bill is what you're alluding to. There was a time when we would publish more information that had bar charts, pie charts, things that were in plain language, to Councillor Schneider's point. And so I think that's one of the things we heard through the feedback, is that's the type of communication that citizens are looking for. So if that's what's intended, that is something we will be exploring.
Okay. And just to be clear on the town hall meetings that I referenced, those are telephone town hall meetings. I had that in my head, but I don't know if that actually said that word. No. Okay. So I think that takes us through government. Any questions from staff before we move on any of that? No? Everybody's pretty clear on it? Excellent. So let's move on then to the economy. And this obviously includes a number of things. I mean, there are some things that are already on staff's work plan, I know, for the coming year in that regard, like updating our KEDS. It'll need to be updated for thank you. The Kitchener Economic Development Strategy, for the benefit of those who may not be familiar with that. But anyway, so with that, I see several people are ready to chime in. So we'll start with Councillor Ioannidis. Thanks, Councillor Galloway-Selak.
Yes, through you, Chairperson for Banovic. I could talk all day about the economy and all that stuff. Just one of the things that I would like to see is, and Rod knows a little bit about this, but I'm looking at someone. We need some more dedicated positions in moving some of our agendas forward, in particular with media and in subgroups with music and all that stuff, because I think we can build things here locally, but if we're not out there in other communities attracting talent and other businesses to come to our community, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think that's one of the things that we need to have a little more to say resources for that. Another thing too is I think we are competing in a global economy, and I think we need resources for going out and obtaining business and talent to our community. So I think more missions, more strategic missions, and whether or not that be in joint again with the new regional economic development that's being formed, or with city staff that they go out and actively get in front of the face of potential suitors that could bring businesses to our community. And I think we should do this more than like Passport to Success. I think is a good initiative, but I think it's once a year. You do it once, and then those folks are like nowhere again. So I think we need to do that, get in their face on a consistent basis, more like a quarterly basis, and actively pursue our hot leads. And that's, to me, I think where we'll start seeing more results, and always constantly touch our potential suitors for this community and business. Like you can't just send out once a year. Well, this is what's happening in Kitchener. I think we need to be sending it on a monthly basis on what's happening in Kitchener, and the region as a whole. Because again, we're all part of a region, and I think that the best story is us as a region. So I think those are the key things that I can think of at the moment. But I know there's a lot more in my mind, and I think we could. Let me wrap around my brain a little this further, but maybe some of my other colleagues will bring some of the ideas forward. So I'm pretty sure I have some more.
Yep. And again, I'll just remind folks that the focus today, some of the things you're bringing up may have an impact this year or in future years, if we can try to stay focused on the things we'd like to really see in 2015. I'm sure we all want everything in 2015. But as I've been reminded, and I pass on the reminder, it can't all happen in 2015. So with that, Councillor Galloway-Selak.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with a lot of the 6 through 10 there on page 1A-4. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up is kind of just to keep it on staff's radar, and it would be an ongoing thing, is to try and continue to keep our finger on the impact that the LRT is having on our community. And when I say that, I mean specifically with respect to the increased tax revenue that we'll see because of the intensification that's happening in the downtown. And I think it's something that we should see a report on yearly, probably would be best, so that we can keep it at the forefront of our minds yearly. I think it was one of the discussions that I had with people at the door over and over again, just with regards to LRT and representing an area that's very far removed from the actual system itself. We talked about feeder buses, and we talked about the I-Expresses, which are probably more pertinent to Ward 5 than the actual ION line itself. But I think when we talked about the impact that it could have, or that it will have on the increased revenue that we'll see because of the intensification, I think that that's something important that we need to continue to communicate with our residents.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Fernandez?
So the first thing I wrote was suburbs, 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 because citizens in my area are tired of hearing about the downtown, the downtown, the downtown. So too many empty storefronts in the suburbs, I think, are really critical. I get asked about that all the time. What are we doing? Why do we have so many empty storefronts? I just talked to Rod beforehand about the Conestoga College area. That's literally devoid of amenities. Really, Tim Hortons and McDonald's doesn't quite cut it for the thousands of students that we have going to the college, the 1,500 plus international students that we have presently enrolled at the college. So I think that's a completely different challenge in terms of our economy, is finding not only good, safe housing for them, but amenities and transportation connections for them. I hear these international students who are sitting on a bus for a minimum of an hour to get to the college. So we really have to work with the region about how we're going to partner with them and help move people and move our students and our elderly population, who also say, I have to walk 25 minutes to a bus stop. So I think it's really partnering with the region to make sure that we've got buses so that we can move people to grow our economy, because if people can get to the places they need to get to, they will spend money and they will have jobs. I mean, it's very expensive for families to be driving their part-time students to their part-time jobs. It really undermines the money that the student is making if the parents are putting a tank full of gas in every couple of days to drive their students. So I see that as a partnership. Just what Councillor Galloway-Seelock was talking about with tax revenue, a lot of the questions I got was, if we're intensifying downtown and we're getting all of this tax revenue, why are my suburban taxes so high? And trying to explain that, and maybe I need a Coles Notes version education on why it seems that the suburban taxes are so high. There's a lot about local business and industry, and I know Councillor Ioannidis is really keen on bringing all kinds of new talent here, but that's not what I've been hearing from citizens in my area. They are really focused on the nuts and bolts of, why isn't my street plowed? Why don't we have a basketball net in my park? Why are all the trees not being replaced? So they're more interested in the nuts and bolts of what they see, as opposed to, are we going to have another tech industry here? Are we going to have more music industry here? I don't hear that. I don't hear that at all. Maybe it's just where I'm living and where my residents are. A lot of my residents do travel to Toronto, and they would be thrilled to have two-way go.
So are you saying on that sort of the continued pursuit of things like the two-way go are a priority? Okay. No, okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to capture what I think the message was there. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think this has kind of been said, but I think good and easy to see metrics is very important when it comes to staff reports, when it comes to, of course, this goes back to our earlier discussion about engagement with the community as well. So when we're having a new development happening in downtown, being in the suburbs, I'm saying infill. So I think reports that go into more in-depth as to what the increased tax base is going to be, as opposed to that single unit or double unit, whatever the current density is, and when there's an upzoning application for that. which is very, and this is something, a question that gets asked by council members, but this is something, information that should be a part of the report to begin with, because it's easy for us to see and for the public to see what that benefit of that infill development is. And a comment from Councillor Fernandez saying, suburbs, and it should be, or that's what it should be as opposed to downtown. Not that I say I disagree, but I think we need to start making a better case of why downtown, because it does need to be there. The development that we speak of, let's be fair, it hasn't really happened yet. It's happening. That tax base isn't online yet. The level of density growth that we would want, it's not there yet. That's what we're pushing for, and that's where we will get that increased tax base, and that's where our suburbs will have a lessening impact and effect on their taxes, but that will happen over time. That's the direction that we're pushing, but each and every proposal that comes forward, we need to start properly having good metrics that measures that out, where we see it when we make the decision on council, where public sees it when they're providing input to council through PICs. I had another one, I totally forgot. I'll quickly jump to another one. I'll come back if I need to. One of the most enriching experiences I had last term at council was attending a conference in for SIGGRAPH. And there was a good complement of staff there, as well as other council members, where we had an opportunity to sit down with businesses, and staff were able to properly make the business case of why Waterloo Region, why City of Kitchener. And there were council members present being able to show the leadership there, showing the strength that the leadership feels that they support that strategy that staff is putting forward in front of those businesses. And I think that's crucial and key. That needs to be a joint effort from council and staff to be able to engage with businesses from outside the region, wherever they may be able to attract them to this region and hopefully to the City of Kitchener as well. So I had another point, but I'll come back if I remember.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Chair, you mentioned specifically 2015. Will there be another opportunity then for items that were with respect to the economy going forward? I'm asking because I'd like to talk a little bit about municipal broadband and those sorts of initiatives.
Yeah, so later in the year, there will be the more comprehensive work plan that will take us from 2016 through to 2019. And that will be our opportunity to provide input into those items that we want to see included there. Right now, the main thing is there stuff we want to see done in 2015? So staff can look at it, and if there's any budgetary implications that can be worked into the 2015 budget.
Okay, I think I will discuss some of that then, because there's some precursor work. So to support where we are now with our Kitchener Economic Development Strategy, we've put a good strong focus on startups in the city, and I think there's a key piece of infrastructure that we can look at to help support that, and that's municipal broadband. Obviously it will have implications for a lot of other progressive items in the city, but essentially it would be increasing internet access speeds throughout the city. And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the Google Fiber initiative, but it would be along those lines, where basically it would be wire-based, but the speeds would be increased significantly. So Kitchener is in a unique position where we own our own gas utility, and we have a high majority ownership of our hydro company as well. And we did have an initiative like this in the past with Atria, but I think it's something that we should look at again. Ideally, I think this needs to be an initiative that starts with economic development, perhaps through that committee. But ideally, it would be something that is a public-private partnership, perhaps with Google. That we do have Google based locally as well. But even if that hasn't happened, and it has happened in the States, there are other companies, Rogers, TELUS, etc., that we could, or Bell, I should say, that we should look at potentially partnering with. I think it's important to start it in 2015, mostly because if you think of a broadband network as the nervous system of the city, the LRT would be the spinal cord. And being that my understanding is there aren't any intentions to offer any sort of internet in tandem with the LRT, I think we need to make sure that if there's an opportunity to be pulling fiber through those pipes during that period of time, that we should be looking at it sooner than later. From broadband, that's the base work from that. That's when we can really start looking at when that system's in place, we can have broader ubiquitous Wi-Fi. And I think that's really important because some of us at the meeting running up to the election, there was a lot of talk about digital inclusion, and Wi-Fi internet access shouldn't be limited to just those that can afford it. So I think it's very, very important as an economic development strategy initiative, and I think going forward, it's even happening today, but going forward, businesses are locating where high-speed broadband is, and it will be as important as, I think, water service and electricity services today in the future.
Okay. Not sure who lit their... Did you want to comment on this? No, I'm looking at Rod. Somebody, hold on. Okay, go ahead, Rod.
Through you, Chair Urbanovich. I had just 30 seconds on. We'd like to engage council in a refreshing of the Kitchener Economic Development Strategy, and we definitely would consider this as an important input into that process. We've already started those discussions with EDAC and with DAC, and we're interested in building that strategy over the next 6 months with council. So,
okay, thank you. Okay, before I go back to people a second time, Councillor Marsh, you haven't spoken. Councillor-elect Marsh, rather, you haven't spoken yet.
You know what? I can save my comments to that wider discussion about the Kitchener Economic Development Strategy. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so just flipping through our colleagues who aren't here. In terms of Councillor Etherington, he raised a couple things. One is just the focus around the implementation of the LRT and the whole notion of how it's going to impact both residents but the businesses along the LRT route, and making sure that we have strong communication plans in place to support that. That from a both BIA and economic development point of view, we're working with those in the affected areas and the region. So that's certainly a more immediate priority. He's also, and probably fits in here, talked about the notion of an arts community incubator, and looking at that. That may be more of a longer term thing, but I'm just raising it so that I don't lose sight of it, and he can provide more clarification on it in our December meeting. Councillor Gazzola also raised the issue of the LRT and impact of constructions. Suburbs getting their fair share of sort of economic development action, and ongoing concerns around the impact, and this is economic development, but more of a regional issue, the ongoing concerns of noise, in particular from the Nola flights on the Hidden Valley area. And there's obviously pluses and minuses that come with that, but that continues to rear its head. And Councillor Yanetsky raised the issue of Belmont Village and his feelings that that BIA has probably received less attention than our downtown BIA, and trying to explore ways of better supporting them in the future. So that's from him. I'll now go and do a second time around before I raise mine. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you. One of the things I wanted to touch upon too is seeing what's happened in the other municipalities within Southern Ontario. I think we're gonna have some concerns with them upping their game, because I think they had some instability in the last 4 years where we've had the opportunity to have some stability. And so I think it's important for us too, not only that we build relationships abroad, but we also build alliances with, in particular, I think Toronto, I think Toronto is a natural partner for us. I think we need to build that alliance further upon. I think another thing that we could look at too is some of the incentives that we may offer too. I think there may be an opportunity to provide some form of incentives in the sense for maybe retail, because citywide I think too would be appropriate. So I think those are some of the things that we could look at, because even though I think in combination of everything that we're doing, that portion of the economy and the retail portion will pick up, but I think we should maybe give it a little bit of an injection of some sort.
Okay, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. And when I had started speaking about more data available, data as speaking to our economy, this was the main point that I had keyed in to speak of, and I forgot about it. So thankfully I remembered it's about our asset management. When I say asset management, I mean real estate portfolio asset management. One of the things that citizens, I'm not sure if they all are as well versed or aware, is the tremendous value of real estate asset that the city does own. And this is real estate asset that we currently have some usages for, or we may not have currently. And these are lots throughout the city, and especially in the downtown core, especially where the attention to development is right now. And the reason why I speak to that is I think we need to be able to measure the necessity to keep some, and as opposed to disposition of others, because holding it just for it to gain value, because it's real estate will always gain value, doesn't always serve our benefit when there could be additional tax-based growth on it as well. And the other benefit is, of course, through disposition, we're able to prioritize funding to many of the things that we talked about without having to affect our taxpayers. And it's investing through investments that we already have, and it's for future investing as well. So just a measure of the different parcels we own, and as to what could be appropriate for further development that would be that would benefit the core here, because that development could be mixed use. It could be additional employment space. It could be additional living space where we have improvement to our tax base as well. And the last point I want to speak to, I was really glad that Councillor Davey spoke of this, because he's been saying this for the last 4 years, and I'm glad he brought it up again. It's about investing into our future economy through the right type of infrastructure. It's not always about the sewers and the water pipes and the gas pipes. It's about the technology infrastructure that's necessary to ensure that we have a growing economy. Of course, as we have a changing economy, I'm sure we're in step with that. So I would strongly support of his comments earlier.
Okay. Councillor-elect Marsh.
So yeah, I just want to add to the conversation that I think we need to look at support for our existing small and medium-sized businesses, in addition to attracting new talent and businesses to our region. I think that the existing ones, in particular, I heard during my campaign from small and medium-sized business owners who were not necessarily part of the tech sector, that they felt that their businesses were not given as much adequate, support and attention from City Hall as the tech industry. And so I think that it's something to consider, because we've had so much success with our, tech sector focus, so that maybe we can broaden that now. And then the other point I wanted to raise is that, we do have vacancies in the suburbs, but we also have vacancies right in the downtown core as well, and maybe we could look at some creative ways to address those vacancies while they're vacant. So in some municipalities, they do things like open up a temporary pop-up art gallery, in a vacant location, or other ways we could address that in partnership with the property owners.
Okay, great, thank you. A few things that I'll bring up. and a number of them have been touched on already by those of you around the horseshoe. I'll speak just initially in terms of one of them, and that is this notion of Google Fiber or other, internet kind of service that Councillor Davey spoke of. I think that is something that needs to be actively pursued. I think one of the things that would be helpful for us to understand is, my understanding is there has been some dialogue at the regional level around this, and I think it would be good for us as much as possible to get an update on where that's at, so that we kind of understand, where this might be going. But there are some unique opportunities to at least lay some of that infrastructure in place potentially with the LRT at a much lower cost now. So that might be something to look at. I think some of the items on my list are things that probably are already in the work plan, but I'll just mention them because I think they are important. Obviously, the ongoing implementation of our current KEDS and the work that will be done on the new KEDS for the next 4 years is important. Supporting the new Regional Economic Development Initiative, I think for us as a city is going to be very, very key. We want to make sure we're supportive of it, that we continue to clarify the roles that we will play versus the roles that the region will play, and get out of the way in terms of ones that they're supposed to be doing going forward. And that's certainly something I'll be putting a fair bit of my attention to going forward. In addition to that, we continue to support things like our film initiative, the digital media hub over at the Kitchener Studio Project, and so on. Those will continue to be priorities. I think that we need to keep a focus on. The other one, and I don't know if this is something that best belongs here, or quite frankly, better belongs later on under the neighborhoods, and it was one that Sarah Marsh, the Councillor-elect Marsh, has raised. I know a few others have. I have raised it, and it's the notion of neighborhood markets. And it may maybe fall better under the neighborhood one, but I just want to make sure it doesn't get lost somewhere along the way. Okay. And I think the final one that I want to raise at this point is the need to begin to pursue partnerships to develop an advanced manufacturing incubator. So in other words, I think we've all heard from people that there's concern around the fact that we've seen a major transition in terms of manufacturing jobs in the area. And, we'll never see the return because the world is changing. We'll never see a return to that kind of traditional manufacturing. But there certainly is opportunities, and we're already seeing some successes in growth in advanced manufacturing as well as industrial manufacturing. And I think exploring the kind of incubator that exists in the City of London, they put one together in partnership with Fanshawe, University of Western Ontario, some of the businesses there, and trying to get something similar to that happening here, similar to what's happening, quite frankly, with Communitech and Accelerator, but in the manufacturing area, I think is a logical next step for us in terms of our economic development strategy. So I'd like to see that start in 2015. So with that, I think that gets us through the economy. Is there any questions from staff before we move on? Not, then we'll move on to the environment, and a few people have already keyed in on this one. So we'll start with Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm a keener. I was going to bring up what you just did, Mayor-elect Verbanovic, with regards to the local markets. I see local markets and community gardens going hand in hand simply because they may fall under environment, they may fall under neighborhood, and they may fall under development. But I believe we're looking at it through our comprehensive zoning bylaw review. And I know that that's on page 30 of our report today. And it says that it's going from 2014 to 2016. And I'd like to encourage that we have that piece specifically looked at through the 2015 process and see if we can move that piece of the comprehensive zoning bylaw review forward. So that's specifically with respects to community gardens and local farmers markets. I think we have an opportunity to make some decisions there in 2015 in the shorter term rather than the longer term. So again, it could fall under environment, development, or neighborhoods, depending on where you want to put it. So that was something I wanted to bring up as well. I'm happy to hear others are encouraging to do that as well. The next piece is something that I actually brought up at committees on Monday with regards to the LED lights, which again falls under environment through, well, it could fall under environment or it can fall under transportation as well. On page 68, I know that it's in the work plan for 2014-2015, but I really think we need to look at the standards that we have. And on page 68, it mentions new developments. It doesn't say anything about commercial standards, I don't believe. I'll double check that right now. So it talks about new developments and conversion strategy. I just want to make sure that we also look at it from any new commercial. One of the areas that I'm dealing with is actually a commercial property that's creating some of the lighting problems in people's backyards. So I think that's something that's important to look at in the short term. And then something new with respect to the environment, and it may not be so new, but I think we need to work on a policy or something that we can enforce with regards to tree management on new developments. And I don't know how to go about doing that, but the problem that we're seeing is that trees are coming down before draft plans of subdivisions. They're strategically being taken down before we get to zoning reviews. People are purchasing properties and on fairly heavy wood-lotted areas, and they strategically start cutting the trees from the inside out so you can't see what's going on. And I don't know what we can do, if there's anything that we can do, because it is private property, but I feel like there's something that we need to look at there, and we need to look at it in the shorter term in order to prevent it from continuing to happen. Because I'm seeing, and I'm sure Councillor Fernandez in her area as well, is we're seeing a lot of that happening right now, and it's disappointing. When we know there's protected woodlots and different environmental pieces, but there's not a whole lot you can do after the fact. So if we can try and be proactive on that one, I think it's something we need to look at.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Galloway-Seelock. And just on that community gardens one, and I agree with you, it would be helpful to look at, and maybe one of the things that staff can put their head around is there a way to deal with it through, temporary approvals to allow it in the meantime until the broader zoning bylaw changes happen. That may be a quick and easy solution. Councillor Fernandez, you're up next.
Thanks. When I look at number 12, and of course Ward 4 was the first ward to be affected by EAB, but we're seeing more cutting happening. The word I put down was partnerships. I think many residents would be more than happy to partner with us. And I know I've said this before, so I feel like a broken record. When we do the tree removal, we need to do the tree removal and the stumping at the same time. And then people feel like we're actually moving forward. If you cut the tree and then 6 months later you stump the tree, and then 6 months later or a year later you replant the tree, citizens are saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we not just doing at least two processes at the same time? And then many of them have, and with the understanding that it is city property, but have taken extra care around those boulevards, have done some plantings, have done some extra landscaping. So they would be more than happy to replant a tree. If it's stumped, they're saying, let me plant something, let me get moving on this. And I think we have to find a way to partner with those residents with that. I understand there's legal ramifications. I understand there's I apologize, I can't think of the risk management concerns around somebody planting a tree. But I think that we have to be open to those possibilities. It's just like we want to be open to community gardens. There's all kinds of risks around a community garden. Somebody could step on a hoe and get smacked in the head with a shovel or whatever. But we have to be open to those possibilities that people say, you know what, I want to do this, and I want to help. I want to create more community. And by having a community garden, by planting trees, we're building community, and people feel like they're being listened to. Of course, I'm always concerned about the amount of tree removals that we have and how we manage our existing trees and our boulevard trees. Sometimes when development happens, and 689 Dune Village Road is consist that monkey on my back. We lost a couple of trees there due to some ambiguous comments or development practices. I think we could have saved those trees on the boulevard. So we have to look at not only our woodlot trees, but our boulevard trees, and how, if there is infill development, how do we preserve those as well? Because many times they're substantial trees. And of course, cleanups along country roads, we continue to see people dumping stuff, and I don't know how we can stop that. I know our crews are out there in the spring, and they're working their darndest to get it cleaned up. But do we send? Is it a messaging that we need to send to people as the region starts looking at different ways of addressing the amount of garbage that goes to the landfill? The concerns I hear is, if they start doing tagging on our garbage, we're going to see more dumping in our rural roads. So we have to speak again. That's a partnership. And the last thing is, maybe it shouldn't be the last thing because both of them go together, continuing growing our trails and cycling connections, which hopefully for me means that we are building less roads, because I think the more roads we build, and I've heard this from Mr. Whitmer time and time again, the more roads we build, the more costs we have. We have to maintain those roads. So if we build better connections that people can use to transport themselves either by walking and cycling, maybe I think maintaining a trail, hopefully, and Mr. Whitmer can correct me if I'm wrong, is cheaper than maintaining a road. So I think we have to look at different ways of transporting people within our community, accessible. And that will reduce our environmental impact in terms of our air quality. If we have more people cycling, more people walking, we have less cars on the road.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fernandez. Next up is Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I won't reiterate what's already been said and probably said better, but I'll say to the points that I agree with and I would support as well. It would be for community gardens. I think more specific, I think we need to look at accessible community gardens as well. With a growing population or aging population, we need to make sure that new things that we add to the community are something that's going to be accessible and utilized by our seniors as well. I know we've done some, and I think there's a significant potential to add more throughout the city. And the other is, of course, our boulevard tree management. I think it's not just for replanting. Of course, those areas that have been affected, that needs to be set as a priority as quick replanting schedule, hopefully captured in the 2015 calendar year for the trees that were cut down affected by the EAB, but as well as our annual management of our boulevard trees, proper trimming. This was a discussion that was talked about last budget. Unfortunately, it was not supported by majority of council. I think it needs to be looked at again. I think there is significant costs for managing after effects of storms and winter effects of ice storms. Then if we were to just prune them, trim them effectively year-round, there would be less damage and potentially less cost to the city. And of course, in agreement with the community trails, I think we do need to start considering outlining community trails that need to have some winter management, community trails that are routes for schools. There are many schools that are situated in the middle of a large suburb as opposed to in the wintertime parents driving their kids to school. The walkways and the trails may be just a 5-minute walk away if we were to properly manage those trails. And I think this is a concern that I heard at the door during election time and soon after recently when signage got put up indicating that there is no winter management for our walkways and trails. And this is a concern to many parents and our community, and I think that needs to be some consideration given to that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Singh. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Urbanovic. A lot of the concerns in that were already conveyed, and I think the bottom line is we need more money when it comes to trees. We need more money when it comes to trails. I think we need to find ways on that, and I think we are getting there. I think with sponsorships, and I think with maybe some partnerships, I think we're going there. And I think this council's got to commit to it as well, and not just talk the talk. So I think we need to commit some dollars. I think I like the idea of these urban markets, but I think they need to be tied in with our own market as well, and maybe be rotating among different communities, and not just because I think if we go along with this on a scale without looking at our own market, we're going to be a detriment to our own market. So I think it should be in conjunction with the market. Another area that I think we could look at too is maybe urban farming, and whether that's indoors or little mini greenhouses or in people's backyards. I think that's something that we could look at. But overall, I mean, as far as the environment, I think we're doing a lot of initiatives. I would like to see something bigger. I like to see ourselves do a little more with alternative energy somewhere, and maybe not just solar, but geothermal. And I know I've had these discussions with some members. So I think we need to up our game a little bit more on that, and continue to be a leader in that area, because I think we're very proud of what we've accomplished. I think we can keep moving forward with that. So I think those are more of a higher level discussions than 2015. Sorry.
Okay. Councillor-elect Marsh.
So on the topic of the temporary markets, I have started to look into the possibility that we might be able to pilot a fresh food truck that could partner with the market and nonprofit partnerships beyond the city, so that we could look at providing healthy, fresh food options in areas that do not currently have easy access to supermarkets. So we'd have to, do the research and map out where exactly those areas are, and then be able to maybe have this fresh food truck, go to the different areas, like a bookmobile concept. If anybody remembers going to the bookmobile, growing up, that was a way to have the library extend to different areas. So we could look at piloting that. They are successfully doing that in several municipalities in the United States and in a few here in Canada. So Toronto has one, Winnipeg, and I'd like to explore that further. And then on the topic of community gardens, yes, let's find more locations to offer up more space for community gardens, but we also have to then remember to offer some support. Minimal support is all they need, but the community garden locations would then require access to water and access to good soil, at least to begin with, and then annually some mulch. So that's something that was brought to my attention by people who are active in community gardens, and so we need to make sure that that's allocated in the budget. And then regarding the trees, I went to a brief discussion that I think happened last week regarding shade policies. And so I know that the City of Cambridge has an extensive shade policy, and the region of Waterloo is looking at this, and I'd like to see what the City of Kitchener has done already and what the appetite might be to just rather than just look at an ad hoc, making sure that we're replacing trees, but have more of a general policy about ensuring shade in different areas, especially for seniors and young folks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor-elect Marsh. I'll now go and review what our colleagues who aren't here identified. Councillor Etherington didn't have anything in this area. Councillor Gazzola, and this could be 2015, this could be beyond, identified his idea or his ongoing desire to see Hidden Valley, and in particular all of Hidden Valley, saved from his perspective. So I just want to put that on the table. Just on that, on a personal note, I do think that the time has now come where we can start the dialogue with the owners of the property in Hidden Valley about what its future holds. What the right answer is on that, there may be some differences of opinion. No, there's definite differences of opinion around the horseshoe, but I think the time has come for us to start those discussions. And Councillor Yanetsky identified the Voisin Greenway, and it was built in the 60s with concrete banks. And I guess, and I heard this when I was canvassing in those areas, is just the concern about how we maintain the greenways. They become very overgrown with trees, underbrush. It's not maintained, and yet many of the residents sort of use them also as walkways. So I think we need to come to grips with that, but certainly greenway maintenance is a big issue. He raised it, and it's something I heard as well. So I'll go around for any additions, and then we'll throw in my own. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Sorry, you just brought something to my attention that I had forgotten, and I think it would be under the environment/development. I'm hearing a lot about when we're allowing natural areas to happen. I'll give you a specific example. Huron Road, between the sound barrier and the sidewalk, is a natural area, and it looks awful. And it looks just like a bunch of weeds. And I think we need to maybe take a step back and look at that and where we're putting natural areas. I think, when we have them around stormwater management ponds, people are expecting that. But when you're expecting something to look more manicured with trees, and then they're being so overgrown that they're growing over the sound barriers and into your backyards, it's creating a problem. So I think it's something that we may just need to review. So where we're putting natural areas, I think we need them. It's just where's most appropriate to have them.
Okay. Councillor Marsh.
I meant to also contribute to add that I agree we need to have more connected trails and pathways so that more people have better options beyond using our cars to get to where we're going. And also during the campaign period, there was it was brought to my attention that there are a few groups out there that are looking for leadership from the City of Kitchener in the area of environment. So there's a group called Divest Waterloo Region that are looking to see the City of Kitchener divest from oil-based investments. It's just something to mention. It's not necessarily to look into. And then also the David Suzuki's Blue Dot campaign had a presentation in September, and it's something to consider looking into, to seeing what would be involved and how we might contribute.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez.
Sorry, I wasn't going to chime in again, but Councillor Marsh raised another issue in my mind. There are many, many small environmental groups who are working in their own silos. And 2 years ago, I was able to bring quite a number of them together. And out of that, there is a movement to create a green hub similar to the Communitech hub. I'm hoping that if they come to us for some support, for some in-kind services, that we will be able to see our way through to that. Hopefully it won't increase budget. Hopefully it won't incur additional costs, because there is a huge volunteer base of people who are very interested in moving forward on a lot of environmental initiatives. And two that Councillor Marsh suggested, I think, are just a very small piece of what's happening out there in that movement. Of course, we support REAP and Waterloo Region, Sustainable Waterloo Region and Climate Action. We're supporting all those, but there are many, many, many more who are starting to work further and further into the environmental field.
Okay, I'll now just bring mine, some of mine forward. And again, the initial couple are things that I think are already partially in the works, but will need some tweaking. I think building on what Councillor Fernandez said, we already have partnerships with Sustainable Waterloo Region and REAP and so on, but I think we can strengthen those partnerships with them and others. Certainly, initiatives like the Blue Dot and Divest, I've heard from them as well, and I think there's opportunities to explore there. Implementation of the Trails Master Plan. Right now, it's on a 10-year timeline, and while I'm not necessarily looking to change that in the 2015 budget, certainly going forward, I would be looking to see how we can tighten that timeline beyond the current 10-year proposal. And in addition to that, the notion of a Grand River Park, and I know that's something that Councillor Davey has spoken of, and others have spoken of as well. May not be 2015, but I just want to make sure it's kind of there already, because it's part of our parks master plan. But I think it just needs to make sure it continues to feel the love and the attention of staff and budgetary priorities going forward. Over and above that, actually, I think that's it for the short term on that area. So with that, any questions from staff on this on the environment section? No? Okay, well, if not, then I think the time has come to break for lunch. We were scheduled for an hour lunch, but it's only 12 minutes after 12, so if everyone's amenable, I'd suggest that we still start at 1 o'clock. Oh, okay, then it's 5 after. You're right, it is. So let's start back at 1 o'clock then. Okay, thank you. I think they moved. To the next slide. Okay, we'll resume this special council meeting dealing with the council strategic plan as well as the business plans for 2015, and we'll continue our discussion with the transportation topics. And I see so far one member of council has chimed in, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Transportation. This is probably, I know I did this plea at the beginning of last term and probably my first term as well, with regards to knocking on doors. I don't know how many other people, or if this is really just a Ward 5 epidemic, but let me know if it is, because I can toot the horn somewhere else then and work on other things. But traffic calming. And I know we just reviewed the policy, and I respect that policy that we've done. And I think that policy really needs to be in place for some of the more extreme situations that we have on our local and neighborhood roadways. But we need to find something that we can do in the shorter term for some of those that aren't hitting the top of the priority list. You know, number 26 and 27, which has legitimate concerns that we're not going to get to for 10, 20 years. What can we do to help make those roads safer for the children who are playing, for the cars that are traveling, the cars that are parked on the side of the road, and quite frankly, for the property that is being damaged by cars that is speeding? So I really think we need to I know we have our traffic calming policy in place, and I'm not suggesting that we touch that. I'm suggesting that we come up with different ways of looking at it, or different ways of being able to get into the community sooner, whether it's purchasing temporary measures that we can put in and remove. I know in Ward 10 they're doing that art project in an intersection. We've really got to come up with ways, because I know the neighbors will help in any way that they can, but the current methods that we have by putting out the speed advisory board it has its pros and its cons. So we need to do something, even if we have to spend a little bit of capital money to do it, we need to come up with new ways. So I think it's a review of what other cities are going through, because they have to be going through the same thing that we are, the type of budget that they're putting towards traffic calming. I know some municipalities do nothing, but I'm not going to sit here and do nothing as a member of Kitchener City Council. And we need to generate new ideas on how we can combat this problem. I do not have one single suggestion for you, other than we need to review it. And I think the old way of thinking in traffic calming needs to stay in place for those ones that are high on the priority list, that need to look at those more permanent measures. But overall, we need to look at new ways of doing things, and I think that's a review that I'd really like to see in the short term, so that we can continue to try and combat this. It's an increasing problem that we have in Ward 5, and I'm assuming that there's similar roadways throughout everybody's ward in the city. That's my only thing for transportation, but it's the most important thing. That if I had to put in and stick to the one thing that you think is a priority in 2015, that would be. All the others are important, and I'm not suggesting they're not, but that would be my number one.
And just before I move on that list, I will say from the canvassing I did citywide, this consistently was probably the number one issue across the city. And in my one-on-one meetings with all of you in terms of issues, I think there's maybe one or two of you that didn't raise it in your top 3 list of issues. So it is something that is a big priority, I think, for council. Councillor Fernandez.
I want to say ditto. And a lot of the perception is the lack of enforcement. So how can we speak to our new chief of police, Brian Larkin, and get some more visibility? And I think, as silly as it sounds, a police car parked at an intersection is a huge deterrent for many, many people. And we all know, if you drive down Wilson Avenue, past Kuntz electroplating, everybody that drives down that road, because it has been enforced so much, puts the brakes on, because they'll ticket you at 55. So we maybe need to get exactly some of that around these high-speed roads, and Kelly is absolutely correct. There are so many of them, and it's a behavior issue, but we have to find ways. I know that Justin Reedman is really working on a lot of different suggestions. One of the things I think, and this will go into the development, so maybe I'll hold it. I won't talk about it because it'll be about development. Parking around schools, huge problem because of speeds, because of parents driving their kids to school. How can we find better ways to address that? And I hear a lot about sound barriers, maybe because I've got a couple of major roads in residential areas backing onto Homer Watson and Huron Road, where there is significant traffic. I'm not sure if Councillor Galloway-Seelock is hearing the same thing. As Fisher-Hallman gets more traffic, there might be some issues around that. Okay, that's it.
And that, I mean, the sound barrier issue in particular is really a regional one, but one of the things that may be helpful even is to get the regional staff to come and do a presentation here, because I mean, I've been on council for a long time, and I can't remember them ever coming to do a presentation on you know, what they look at, and you know, how those numbers are determined and how they make their decisions with respect to projects, and that could be part of what we're after.
Yeah, actually Huron Road is...
Go ahead.
Huron Road is a city road.
Huron's a city one?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor-elect Marsh.
In my ward, traffic calming was also a major priority. And so, if that's the case for most of the areas in Kitchener, maybe it would be good to get even a special council meeting that's focused just on, learning from the city planners, what are some of the, ways we can address it beyond traffic calming reviews, and so that we could really delve into that more deeply. I think, so there's a train that runs in Ward 10, and it's a freight train that comes along the main track that also, VIA uses in the GO, but it typically comes at peak times, at peak rush hour times, and so there was a suggestion by a resident that I thought was a good idea, that I'll just mention that maybe we could have some kind of screen that's shown to the car traffic, just letting them know how long the train is going to be, because at times it's a 15-minute wait for the train to change tracks, and it's blocking Lancaster Street. So just another added thing to add to the brainstorm.
Okay. Councillor-elect Schneider.
I concur with the speed issues, huge issue. When I was going door to door, I had a very brief talk with Brian Larkin at a Rangers game and brought this up with him, and his comment was, wouldn't it be great if we had the education to not need the traffic calming measures? There is an effect with emergency services, with traffic calming, also with snow removal. One of the suggestions I had coming up door to door was rotating the enforcement positions. As Councillor Fernandez says, she knows on Wilson Avenue near Kuntz Electroplating, you're trained same as you get off the expressway and go down Ottawa Street around the S-curve to River Road. You know at Drager that cruise is going to be there. Perhaps if we can work with regional police and have different areas where people are thinking about that a little bit more often, I think the enforcement would really help. Another issue that came up for me was, and I know it's a regional road, Fairway Road, was safe crossing areas. I happened to talk to a lot of residents who were just picking their children up from school, and the parents really need to cross, especially with the younger children. There's also issues with trying to turn from Thaler Road onto Fairway Road and all those sides. So just some safety issues there, and I know that's regional, but to work with them on that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Again, same comments as what everyone else is saying, that, and I think Councillor Galloway-Sealock really hit the nail on the head, that it's obvious and understandable that we can't address all the streets that need to be looked for, or have concerns with speeding. It's a priority issue, and obviously there are significant measures that need to be put in place on the ones that have serious problems. But there are many others that need to be addressed sooner than later, and they can't necessarily wait for them on that priority list, where it will take years for that to be addressed. But that problem is now for those parents with young kids, and that's where speeding is an issue that we may not see as a priority on an overall citywide issue, but in that neighborhood, in that ward, it is a serious concern. And those can be addressed with small measures, and she already alluded to them, and without being specific on one, we don't have to do all. It doesn't need to be all or nothing approach. A matter of a little bit of a street narrowing wherever we can, and that will only build to on top of the additional measures that would come in place when that street would be addressed as a larger strategy. So changing the way we look at it, wherever minor speed calming measures that can be put into place, that would be great if you can look at that. How we can build it into as a strategy. The other is roundabouts. Obviously, the region has been pushing for the strategy considerably throughout the whole region as a mitigation of transportation demand management, as opposed to street widening and all that. And the city has some in our inventory as well now. Huron is one, and we're looking at many other areas as well. We need to make sure as we're building more and more that pedestrian safety and crossing is something that we start looking at quickly. We don't want to be looking at problems after they occur. We want to be proactive on them, especially when it comes to public safety. And the last point that I'll speak to, and we talked about it before, it's management. And on the terminology here on the slide itself, it says environmentally sustainable, safe, and affordable options. And if you speak to that, we need to manage our trails and our walkways better. We need to provide alternatives apart from just cycling lanes, which is necessary as a strategy, but alternatives for walking as well and cycling. And trails meet that requirement. So we got to start looking at how we can manage it. Lighting is one, and winter maintenance is the other, and it's consideration of what those cost allocations could be. And again, similar to my last point, it doesn't always have to be all or nothing approach. Let's first take a look at our, again, schools, first priority. The easiest and accessible routes to our in neighborhoods to our primary schools, where parents need to meet, necessary routes that are convenient for the children. Let's look at those and see how can we manage those routes first before we consider widening it to as a city-wide approach. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Galloway Seelaw. Actually, no, you've already been. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, through you, Chair Urbanovic. I guess the one thing about traffic calming is, I think that's another thing that we need to advertise more, because again, that's something that a resident in one street, that's, let's say even it's a small street, we're going to call in and start calling us and asking for a traffic review and everything else. And maybe if that's been better educated to the public, that they would go, well, really, we're probably not going to get, to be realistic, we're probably not going to get traffic calming here. So maybe I won't call in to complain about this. Maybe I'll figure out a way to, I don't know, find a solution outside and whatever it is maybe. But I think we can be a little more efficient in conveying that message, and maybe that will be able to alleviate some of that list, because realistically, we can't do every street.
Okay. Before I go back to you, Councillor Galloway Seelaw, Councillor Etherington also brought up traffic calming concerns in Victoria Park, Mill Street, Park Street, lack of sidewalk along, I guess it would be Jubilee Drive from David Street. I think on both sides, because what happens is the sidewalk on the boathouse side tends to sort of be more the pathway that goes along the river, along the lake, and on the other side there is no sidewalk. So he's expressed some concerns around that, and the need for, especially with the boathouse scheduled to open in December, for some sort of mid-block crossing. So since people will be using the parking lot, I think essentially his primary notion would be sidewalk from the parking lot to a mid-block crossing that would allow people to cross over in front of the boathouse area. In terms of nothing with Councillor Gazzola, and Councillor Yanetsky talked really about general infrastructure concerns. Parts of his ward are getting older now, Forest Hill and so on, and concern around reconstruction and resurfacing of roads and ensuring adequate infrastructure dollars to support that updating in the budget were the issues he identified. Councillor Davey, you haven't gone yet, so I'll let you go next.
Yeah, I'll just be brief on the traffic calming issue as well. I've stated my concerns with speed bumps in the past. I don't think it's a great solution, simply because we're doing 2 a year. It's a drop in the bucket, and even if we were to increase it to 5 or 10 a year, it would still be, the list is so long that we're not going to get action the citizens are happy with. So my only comment is that I think this is definitely something, as a couple other members have said, that we need to work with the regional government on, because it is people that are breaking the law, and they have greater tools than we have, and they can lobby for tools even greater than that, because they need to find a way to efficiently ticket people, because we all are aware of the cost of police officers, and if the first solution is we have to add, the region's going to say you have to add more police officers, that's not really a realistic solution to this either. So they have to look at how and where they ticket, and I do have frustration sometimes, as mentioned, the S-curve on Ottawa Street in the ward I represent. Well, none of the residents are really all that concerned if someone's doing 20 or 30 kilometers over the speed limit on Ottawa Street, because there's no residences there. Those services should be on the city streets like Manchester, where people live, and there's children playing. That's why we need to work more with the regional government in that respect.
Okay. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with trying to work with the police, but I've been here for 8 years, and it's not, in my humble opinion, it's not going to happen. They will sit on the regional roads because they can get adequate ticketing in a short period of time. Whereas if you go to, you mentioned Manchester, I'll mention Parkvale, they'll go and they'll sit there for a couple hours and they might just get a couple people, but they're not, I went on a ride along one time and they're like, if people aren't going much over 60, we're not going to ticket them. And not that I want the public to know that generally, but that's still a huge concern when you're on a local roadway and kids are playing in the front yard. It's different, like you said, on an Ottawa street. If they're going 60 or 65, most people aren't going to have a huge concern with that. I just don't think we're going to end up getting, because we do have a program in place with the police right now where one of my biggest concerns is Parkvale. And there's definitely others, but where this quarter, the police, it's on their list of streets to go to, but they may make it once or twice. And it's just not going to help solve the overall problem. And I am not an advocate of just putting in speed humps everywhere. That's why I think we really need to do this review and come up with ways that are more strategic, that don't cost as much money, but have a lasting impact. And I really don't have that piece. And I do agree with Councillor-elect Snyder, where we can try and encourage the police and ourselves with the education piece to try and get people to slow down on local roadways, and that'll help a little bit, but I think we do have to take it further, and I don't have the answers, but we need to look at that. The other thing I was going to bring up was roundabouts. Councillor Singh already did that, just making sure that we continue to look at best practices with regards to the pedestrian safety at roundabout crossings, and potentially look at what our policies say and what we can change. And then the last point I have is completely a regional matter and completely selfish, but it'll take me 10 seconds to ask Mayor-elect Urbanovic to advocate on behalf of the residents of the Huron Village, Mattamy area, as well as people who would like to attend the cemetery for transit in the area. There's a little bit in the Huron Village area, but not nearly enough. Nothing for the Mattamy subdivision, and no one can get to the cemetery currently via public transportation. So I encourage you to bring that to the forefront as our representative there.
Well, thanks for raising that, and I'll use this opportunity to add, I had my meeting with the regional CAO, Mike Murray, on Monday. He's been meeting with all the councillors, both returning and new ones, to get a sense of what our priorities are in the coming term. And two of the issues that I raised there were issues of traffic and speeding and so on in general around the city, including roundabouts and regional road right-of-ways, because obviously the collectors are for the most part all their responsibility. And secondly, the need as the region goes through their transit review prior to the implementation of the LRT in 2017, the need to start serving underserviced areas in the suburbs. And one of the ones I mentioned actually was the lack of service to the areas around Williamsburg Cemetery was one that I specifically mentioned with him. So yeah, it has been raised already, and I'll continue to raise it formally around the council horseshoe as the term begins. Councillor Ioannidis, you had something before I go into my list? Go ahead.
Since we're beating up on the region.
No, we're not beating up on the region. We're simply it's a new tune. We're simply advocating around the issues that are important to us.
I think it's important to add in that you yourself push for more walkable, more lighting, and more for our regional roads. Because I know in my area, there's no sidewalks, there's no street lights, there's none of that. And I think you need to push more for that.
Okay. Thank you for raising that. Just in terms of sort of some of my priorities going forward, and some of them are already essentially in the work plan, but things like continuing with our accelerated infrastructure program, which really lines up again with the kind of thing that Councillor Netsky has raised from a transportation point of view, continuing to build on some of our partnerships with things like car share and bike share as we go forward, I think in particular. And while this isn't a 2015 priority, bike share is really going to need to be looking at a comprehensive region-wide solution by the time the LRT starts in 2017. And, right now we've got sort of two competing visions plus a third one that's being talked about, and I think at some point we're going to need to come to terms with that as a region. Specifically as it relates to the city, though, there's two things I'd like staff to look at in terms of the work plan. One is to develop a complete streets policy for the city of Kitchener. And it's one that, while it will require some body of work, it's one that we've already started the work on. When we redeveloped King Street, we developed it using a complete streets philosophy, which is basically one that balances pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers in terms of any reconstruction and rebuild, as well as any new construction and rebuild. And so King Street was done that way. Waterloo, Ajax, others actually have gone a step further in terms of having specific projects. They actually have a policy in place with respect to that, and I think we should be looking at doing the same so we can maximize our future capital investments in that regard. And then the second one is with respect to the speed pilot program in the school areas. I know that is slated to come back later this year, if I remember correctly. We were piloting 9 out of 66 schools this year. I'm generally hearing some positive things about it. I don't know where staff is at on it, but I think, assuming that staff's review will be positive, I think we need to look at how we're going to implement it around the rest of the city from a school safety point of view. And so that's certainly something that is a priority for me. So with that, I think that covers the transportation area. Any questions from staff on this before we move on? Okay, if not, we'll move on to development. And Councillor Fernandez, you're first up on that one.
Thanks. It's because I alluded to it when we were talking about transportation, and one of the things that I think we have to hold the feet to the fire is our development industry. I know that we're talking about doing more streets in a grid pattern, but the grid pattern also encourages speeding. So if we're going to go in that direction to make it more walkable, then I think we also need to implement some narrowings of the street, so that those pinch points, and I think that's what Justin Reedman calls them quite often, as pinch points, where visually it slows people down, but also strongly encourage better tree planting by the development industry, that the soil on the boulevards will sustain the trees. According to Justin, that if there's, again, a visual, not a barrier necessarily, but seeing those larger trees does have an effect on the way people drive. I think you often will see people drive a little slower down a heavily treed street than you will down a brand new street that people don't get a sense of, that there's people living here, sort of thing. Of course, I've always been big opponent of urban sprawl, and I think we have to figure out, I know that we're looking more and more towards infill, but how we do infill, it's number 22 on the list. I really have seen the effect of infill in my ward and how it has impacted the community, the ongoing problems with a couple of the infill that are happening. So we have to really look at how we're going to design those neighborhoods and how they're impacted. And the planning process, I did allude to that in the very beginning. I do really like how the planning department brings forward new planning developments and how they address it with the public, how they seem to really listen to what the public is saying. I think we need to continue with that in our other departments when we're having public meetings with people. They have to feel like they're being listened to. And living in an area for 10 years and all of a sudden finding out that there's a new development behind you or that there's an infill happening on the corner of your street. If you are part of the process and part of the solution, it's easier for the citizens to accept that happening.
Okay, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Just one thing I wanted to have staff look at was the possibility of having somewhere, I'm going to say somewhere, it's likely the internet, for people to go for timelines or development applications for the newer areas, just because that's what I'm experiencing, where it really outlines what's going to happen and when. And I know we have the Rosenberg plan, but for a layperson to go on and Google or search on our internet, on our website, the Rosenberg plan, it doesn't mean a whole lot to them. So it just shows it can show MU2. Well, what the heck does MU2 mean? So I spent a lot of time, especially in the Huron Woods, Huron Village area, explaining to them, because I have the knowledge of what's going to be built there, or at least the ideas of what's going to be built there. And I know we can't say, well, it's 90% that a grocery store is going to go on the corner, but the zoning currently isn't there, and the plan says, I don't even know what the correct zoning would be, but we need to have an easy, readable solution for, and I just use the Rosenberg plan because it's one of our newest ones as an example, that we can then communicate to the residents. Here's where you go to, and here's kind of the timelines that we see. But again, we always know that development we can't make anyone develop along the timelines. It's all driven, timelines are driven by them, but this is what you're going to see coming into your community, or here's what falls under MU2, here's what falls under residential 8, here's what falls under, easy readable. And I think that will go a long way. So, as we continue to build out the rest of Kitchener, we are being as transparent as possible for the people who are living in that community.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, it's one of the things we often hear about is those sort of trying to see more stuff presented and using KISS principles. With that, Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. So, aspect of development, one thing that we need to be cognizant of is, we don't want gentrification happening, especially as development occurs in our core here, and infill as well in areas throughout our city. And one aspect of consideration that I don't think as much dialogue as should be has had yet is working with our developers to ensure there's more affordable housing or more affordable units that are being built. And that doesn't need to be something that's just pushed down as a mandate by the city, as a municipality, or something that we need to take it upon ourselves to build more affordable housing. I think as development interest increase, as more opportunities are out there in the marketplace, we need to be a cooperative partner with our development community. And one way of easily doing that is considering easing up or looking at our our density guidelines. In an area, if I'm going more into detail than I really need to, rather than just giving a bit of a direction. But to make my point, that's why I'm going to more specifics. If a developer is allowed to build one extra floor, but in which case the business case makes sense, but we put a requirement, certain number of units in that building need to be at affordable market rate or less than affordable market rate. That's one way of doing it, working with the development community. And that's just a simple idea that may or may not be able to be plausible, but that's not to say that we can't be try to look for unique opportunities. So that would be one. And the other is something that Councillor Fernandez started speaking of. When development is happening in new communities, we need to look at how the roadways are laid out, ensuring that those communities are better interconnected as alternative accesses through that community apart from just vehicular traffic. And to ensure that we put in the right type of measures when new development is happening. We don't have to have that development occur knowing full well density will grow over time, more traffic patterns will shift to that area, and then we come back as a report, well, guess what? Now we need to, speed calming measures. We can put those speed calming measures well in advance, even before they're necessary, just because they're proactive, because they're going to be required sooner or later. And that's at an opportunity where the developer takes on some of that responsibility, as opposed to shifting that on our taxpayers when that's going to be coming down, which we know. So that would be the other one.
Okay. And I think I'll just point out, and I agree with you, Councillor Singh, on the gentrification piece. Our zoning bylaw review may actually be that very opportunity to start incorporating some of that stuff as we go forward. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, through you, Chair, for Banovic. I think things that I would like to see, and I know we've sort of touched upon it before, but I would like to see incentives for creating high urban design, because I think if you build a great building, it encourages other developers to build great buildings, and that's what to me also will attract businesses and families to communities. Because when anyone who goes to any other community and they see these very nice, attractive buildings, they go, "Wow, this community is special." And I think that's one thing that we need to look at, as well as looking at the environmental focus as well, and how do we build that into that as incentives as well as in maybe in Energy Star buildings or LEED. I don't know what it is, but I think if we could combine those two, we would set our community atop among many other communities as a place to be and to live and have a high quality of life if we have those types of incentives for new development.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you. I just want to echo Councillor Singh's comments about gentrification and in condo buildings to ensure that there are various rates of cost and housing, affordable housing options within the condos, and also echo his comments on the proactive calming measures as developments begin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marsh.
So yeah, I agree that we need to ensure we have sufficient affordable housing in our community, and I think that'll be great to address as we go forward. But I also want to mention that in Ward 10, in the downtown in general, we've had a real focus on the revitalization of King Street, and we've done a fantastic job by all accounts. But we do need to continue on and push for strong development in the side streets and for beyond the current definition of the core, so beyond Frederick and Benton, and go beyond to the Market District. So I just want to add that to the agenda.
Okay. Before I go around to round two, issues identified by other members of council, and this one, quite frankly, I'm not sure if it really belongs here or under neighborhoods, or maybe it belonged under government earlier. Councillor Hetherington raised property standards and ensuring that we deal more effectively with eyesore properties and some of the issues associated with them, whether it's drug issues or other issues associated with some of those properties, and just making sure we're properly resourced to deal with that. That would be it on that one. So, Councillor Fernandez, and then I'll go over my own.
I'll just be really quick, because I heard a couple of things that were being talked about, participating in the planning process. I don't know how many times we've heard from residents, all of a sudden there's a trail going behind. So the responsibility needs to lie not only with our planning department, which I think does have the information, but we have to make sure that the new residents or the existing residents have the information as soon as possible. So if there's a trail going in, or if there's a change to the neighborhood, that information gets sent out to the residents as quickly as possible. The other quick and dirty way of resolving some of the issues are when people go into model homes and they look at, well, this is where the trail is going, or this is where there might be a school property, and then that all changes 10 years later. It comes as quite a shock. So maybe we have to work with the real estate industry, with the developers and the builders, and make sure that any information that is being put out in these model homes is as factual as possible, or that the words conceptual are in big letters and not in teeny tiny print at the bottom. I think that's a real quick and dirty, easy solution.
Okay. So, and I'm encouraged to hear some of the ideas that have been brought forward by members of council, because I certainly would concur with a number of them in this area around the issues of development, particularly things like addressing the potential for gentrification. I mean, I've heard that a lot, and I've heard about the desire to see that happen proactively as opposed to reactively, because if we wait until it becomes a problem, the effort taken, the effort needed to actually respond to it increases exponentially. I'm also encouraged, and I believe it's actually already in the work plan, but that'll, I guess, be reported back on by staff, but is the infill redevelopment guidelines. And that, I think, is absolutely paramount, with the LRT going through, with the station area studies that are being done, and intensification happening throughout the city. We know it's going to happen. We know it's the right thing to happen. We know it needs to happen, but it needs to happen in a way that respects existing neighborhoods, and in a way that brings our community along with the notion that change will happen. And I think those guidelines and the engagement of the community in developing those guidelines, and I'm talking something more comprehensive like Edmonton has done, and I know you certainly the returning councillors have heard me talk about that in the past, is I think where we need to go as part of that. I think in terms of development, everything has pretty much been covered off. I mean, on a longer term basis, I mean, I think that complete streets notion actually goes one step further to the complete neighborhoods notion in terms of how planning is going to take place. But that's something I'll talk about later this year when we talk about the 4-year plan. So if there's nothing else, does staff have any questions on this section? No? Just before we move on, there is one point that I just want to go back under transportation that I missed under Councillor Yanetsky's, and he talked about some of the other stuff that folks talked about traffic speeding, traffic calming, trails, and so on. He referenced, and staff may want to explore this with him, but the possible removal of traffic calming on Greenbrook when I had my meeting with him. I'll leave it up to him to talk about that with you guys and where that's coming from and what that means. But I wanted to make sure it wasn't missed. So with that, we'll now move on to our last section for today, and that's neighborhoods. And Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Quick on the draw today. There's a few things that I want to bring up. I noticed that in the plan on page 28 that Jack Couch Park and Centennial Stadium are in the 2014 work plan. And I just want to lend my voice to making sure that that stays at the forefront. Obviously, it's going to move into 2015 work plan, and I just want to make sure that that stays there. The neighborhood strategy, which I know is being worked on, again, it's just another want to make sure that that stays on track, because there's going to be a number of outcomes of that, I think, that are going to be strong priorities for our community moving forward. And so I know it's being worked on, just want to make sure that it stays high on our priority in the work plan. One thing that came up a little bit before the election was some residents connecting with, I think, a few of us, current members of council, with regards to dog parks. And I know that we have some in our leisure facilities master plan, but I'm not sure that we've ever contemplated in there a large-scale dog park. And that may include looking at converting one of our larger maybe district parks into almost a full-fledged leash-free area dog park that may be fenced or may not be fenced. Just something to have staff take a look at to see if it's a possibility of a larger, because it's, I don't have a dog, but it sounds as though they're very cramped. It's creating a lot of problems, and if we can have a bigger, larger space that's just kind of an open area, and where that may be, it may be a good idea, even if it becomes a destination point, not necessarily. I still think we need to have some of the smaller ones in more of a neighborhood perspective, but this one may be more of a destination park that dogs can get out to every once in a while. And then I just wouldn't be representing Ward 5 if I didn't put my plug in for the Southwest facilities. I realize that the shovel will not go in the ground in 2015, but we need to keep that on the forefront of our agenda in 2015, and maybe make some strong decisions around the park and its future in 2015, especially with working towards some of the sponsorship strategy and partnership dollars that we can work towards moving these facilities forward, because second to traffic calming for Ward 5, and I'm sure there'll be other wards that will enjoy these amenities when they do get built. It was the second most thing that I heard at the door, so I think we just really need to keep it in the forefront as we continue to move forward now that we have a master plan and some timelines, but I think we need to continue to push forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Councillor Fernandez.
Okay, around the first one about the kitchen facilities, maintain accessible and clean, my first thought, of course, is our community centres, which I think are amazing amenity spaces, but unfortunately are not open when our families need them to be open. Many of them are open during the day, which assists a small segment of the population. That may change with our aging population. But there are so many opportunities on Saturdays and Sundays, and you know, I'm not a big advocate of having, you know, more shopping and you know, taking time away from families, but community centres actually encourage opportunities for families to spend time together and do things together. So I would really like to see us investigate having community centres open all day Saturdays and all day Sundays, and you know, that there may be some controversy around that, but I do hear that they could be well used. The neighbourhood associations, I think, are seeing, at least a couple that I've spoken to, less involvement and more staff involvement in what's happening. And I think the neighbourhood associations are really the pulse of our neighbourhoods. So are we missing something, or are we changing how we're dealing with that. I think it's critical that we continue to listen to our neighborhood associations and have them be the cornerstone of what is happening in our neighborhoods, whether it's programming, whether it's activities, whether it's festivals. They are the pulse of our neighborhoods. They're the people on the street. We talks about number 25 about playgrounds and neighborhood trees and trails. Again, I think that we need to partner with the development industry. When they put a toddler park, we have to remember those toddlers grow up, and they grow up pretty fast. We need some amenities for our young, our older children. So those of the ages of 10 to 18. Quick and easy basketball nets. I mean, they're not hard to maintain. They have so many great varieties now that are easy to maintain. We could put those in lots of places in our neighborhoods and neighborhood parks. Shade areas. I know that Councillor-elect Marsh was talking about that. There are many opportunities. I think in one neighborhood park I'm thinking about in particular. Dune South and Thomas Lee. It's a vast area, and I'm thrilled that it's such a vast area, and it is extremely well used. We were able to get a picnic table for some seniors who gathered there, but we need some shade. There is no shade, and again, we should be looking at shade opportunities, both built and natural shade for those areas. And I think the last one is. The onus is on us as councillors to continue to encourage Festival of Neighbourhoods. There was a great uptake in this last year through challenges, I think, that we sort of put out in our communities for our neighbourhoods to have festivals, and that's how we build community. So I think the onus is on us at council to really encourage. So really it's not even a staff initiative. I think it's council that really needs to get out there and encourage the Festival of Neighbourhoods.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. And similar to that last thought, I think with a number of, more of a micro level, small events, festivals, block parties that occur in our various neighborhoods in the city is something that we need to give more assistance with. And that can be done through ensuring that our neighbor associations that I personally think the model that we have right now isn't very equitable amongst all the neighborhood associations, some which have the utilization of a community center and through programming are able to accumulate vast sums of reserves through revenue that they can garner through the programming, as opposed to smaller neighborhood associations that don't have that access. And so it's not to say that they are not as motivated or they're not as energized when they struggle to get additional volunteers. It's a lot of times they just don't have much at their disposal to be able to do with. So I think that needs to be looked at sooner than later of the funding model that currently exists between the different neighborhood associations. I don't think this needs to be new funding that needs to come out of the tax base. I think it needs to be made perhaps a better sharing aspect amongst all the neighborhood associations in the current model that we have. The other is I think we already talked about community gardens, but I think that's a neighborhood strategy. The more smaller community gardens that we have, it creates a vibrancy in a neighborhood and creates an active place of gathering that we need to encourage and put the necessary resources, like Councillor-elect Marsh has already said, that it needs to be with staff assistance. That's great that we have a lot of volunteerism in the community that are willing to step up with ongoing maintenance and operation, but ongoing assistance needs to be allocated to it as well. And apart from community gardens, I think even small parkettes, that goes away from larger parks, and a lot of new subdivisions that can accommodate them. I think we need to, or inbuilt areas, we need to look at in smaller parkettes into suburbs. I think those would be the main.
Okay, thank you. Councillor-elect Schneider.
Thank you. One of the positive comments I received going door to door was the appreciation of our parks, the neighborhood parks. They are very well maintained. People appreciate the equipment that's there and the opportunities for recreation. Another issue that came up was uniform property standards. I talked to a citizen on South Hill Drive, and he said, look, I know we're not the most ritziest neighborhood in the city, but there are some bylaw infractions, and he pointed out an RV, an oversized RV that was parked on a driveway for most of the summer, and he said, that would not be allowed where my daughter lives near Kiwanis Park, so something to consider, and the opportunity for street parties where the neighbors can bring their barbecues out and just have some time together on their street. The ability to make that easy, to maybe a one-stop thing that would get them the roadblocks and the approval to do that came out. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
So just to echo what Councillor Galloway-Seelock mentioned about a larger dog park might be a good possibility, but also I think there's an appetite for more actually, I don't think we have any micro dog parks, so to potentially, pilot some micro dog parks that would be essentially just a small cordoned off area within an existing park that would be allowing off-leash dogs to roam around and but stay safe away from the kids playing in the other part of the park. So just something to add. And then chicken coops came up. I don't know if that's this topic in neighborhoods, but I think that that can come up in bylaw. So then also regarding the neighborhood strategy that is coming, I am very excited about that. I think that we need to maintain keeping that as a high priority and to look at placemaking as a concept to focus on within that neighborhood strategy going forward. I agree with Councillor Singh that we do have an inconsistent model for neighborhood associations, and it would be good to see at least coherent explanation about how that has happened, because I'm aware that in the past we did try to make that more consistent, and there was a lot of pushback from the neighborhood associations to change the model, and so it'd be good to at least be really clear going forward about the differences, and perhaps there is an appetite to become more consistent now. I don't know, but I think it would be good to focus on that. Oh, and one other thing to add for neighborhoods. So we've seen a lot of success in the perception of safety in the downtown, partly due to lighting at night. And so some neighborhoods have some really dark corners in public areas that maybe if we could look at options for motion censored lights that would be low-level lights that are not LED, or that are LED but low level, or some, let's look into options that could allow for it to feel safer within the neighborhoods as well.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Through you, Chair Verbanovic. Some of the things were mentioned, like the micro dog parks, the funding model for the community centers, because I was just last night at the Boardwalk Neighborhood Association, and they're fairly new, and they don't have the same capability of raising funds as other associations have. So maybe there's some kind of model in there, like the NFL does, like a salary cap or something like that, that could be applied. I don't know. But another issue too is if we can look at, again, these public-private partnerships to help build some of these facilities, I think rather sooner than later, and I'm just not talking about in my ward, but I think in all the wards, because there may be opportunities there that we may fall lucky upon and get some of these things happening sooner.
Okay. So looking at the councillors who weren't here, I think the only one that came up was Councillor Etherington, who talked about, looking at more ways for us as council to be involved with the neighborhood associations and more directly in neighborhood work. I think that's the only one that came up from the three of them that was specifically neighborhood focused. Second go around, Councillor Galloway Seelock, and then I'll bring mine up.
Yeah, it's nothing new. I want to make one comment about the neighborhood associations and one just about the micro dog parks, because I focused on the macro one. But just as an example, a really good example that I've seen is in Vancouver in the Olympic Village. They were able to put a dog park, and it was just it's a fenced area. It's not very large, but they had one section of it quartered off for small dogs and one for large dogs. But again, it's not very big in the grand scheme of things, so it may be something that we could retrofit, but just an example to give you if you're going to be doing that work of what they've done there. And just with regards to the neighborhood associations, I have no problem looking at the equity of neighborhood associations, but I just want to comment that you can do a lot with nothing. And Williamsburg and the Huron Community Association did a lot with nothing, and the Huron Community Association uses a school now. They've started programming at a school, and just using our staff to get the into the school is really important, and work that needs to be done by staff to help with that. But it is an opportunity for them to generate revenue, and the WCA didn't have a place to operate initially, but I don't have a problem with looking at equity across the board, but we all do need to come up with creative solutions to make sure that we can all do what we want to within the community, and then the volunteers can do what they're looking to do as well.
Okay, so from my perspective, a number of ideas have already come forward, and I'm encouraged by them. Ideas around placemaking, looking at how we can alter our community center staffing model to expand the hours to include things like weekends and so on. I mean, these are things that I hear all the time from residents in my existing ward that I represented, and that I heard as I was going around the city talking to different folks. I think some of these additional ones are also part of the work that I think is happening on neighborhoods that's already in our work plan. But I think it would be helpful to consider looking at creating a neighborhood development office using existing resources, and that would, in many ways, really try to centralize the best practices and best ideas that not only exist in our community but across the country around neighborhood development, and could better support our neighborhood associations and other partners in terms of making things happen. In addition to that, I think going forward, and some of this, again, is not necessarily stuff that has to happen in 2015, but I'll put it out there because it could be looked at. It's things like creating a citywide neighborhood day celebration, so it's building on the notion of Festival of Neighborhoods. Some cities are doing something like that, and I think, again, it would probably take us a better part of a year to get a first one happening, but we can certainly start the dialogue around that going forward. In addition, looking at something like and I've called it a My Kitchener initiative, but it's really something built around community pride. Probably the most famous one out there is the I Love New York campaign that existed probably about 20 years ago, and many people can still remember it. And I mean, other cities have done different things. I think Toronto, if I remember, they did something with wasn't it cows they were painting or something? I mean, different cities have done different things over the years to create a sense of community pride in different neighborhoods and so on. I know Buffalo's they've painted buffaloes and stuff like that, and done different neighborhood initiatives. So I think it's looking at those kinds of ideas and how we can use them to help build neighborhoods. The biggest one, though, that I would, and this is something that I would personally like to work with all members of council on and staff, and it's developing neighborhood development plans for every neighborhood. And again, it may not start this year from a workload perspective, but it's looking at all of the players that we have in a neighborhood. So it could be the neighborhood associations, the school councils, the interested churches, businesses, some citizens, and starting a process to develop neighborhood strategic plans, essentially, and what we're doing at a citywide, but creating it at a neighborhood or at a ward level, and then seeing how that would unfold, and the recommendations that would come out of it, that would then sort of become a work plan over the next 3 or 4 years. I know that was something that Glenn Murray did back when he was, when he was mayor of Winnipeg, and others have explored that. So that's certainly an area that in the coming months I want to have some more dialogue with members of council on, and with staff to see how we can evolve it. So with that, Councillor Galloway-Seelock, one last time.
Sorry. I just thought of something, having been on the Centennial Committee for Cityhood a few years back, I just wanted to, I don't know if it's in the work plan or not, but it would need to be in 2015 if we're going to do any celebrations in 2016 with regards to the City of Kitchener being Kitchener. So I don't know if that's something that's in the work plan or if it's not something we're going to celebrate because we celebrated our cityhood, but just something I wanted to bring forward.
Well, and probably going along with that is also thinking about what we're going to do for 2017 and as part of Canada's broader 150th celebrations. Mr. Wilmer, you seem to have an answer to that.
We do have an answer for that, and unfortunately the answer is we've already dealt with it. So when we celebrated the centennial of cityhood, it was with the conscious decision that becoming a city is something we all celebrate. Changing our name from Berlin to Kitchener was actually something that kind of divided the community. And celebrating that with 100 years might again divide the community. So we decided to put our celebratory eggs into this cityhood basket, also realizing, though, that Canada's 150th is coming up in 2017, and that'll definitely be a huge opportunity for a citywide celebration.
And that is fair. I didn't remember that conversation.
Okay. So with that, any questions from staff? Mr. Wilmer.
I've been holding on to them all day, but this one there was a couple of questions just for clarification. So for Councillor-elect Marsh, you mentioned chicken coops. It wasn't clear as to whether you want more of them or they're a problem and you want it addressed.
I think I know the answer to that. Councillor-elect Marsh, you got to click in. There you go. Go ahead.
You know the answer already?
I think the answer is you'd like it looked at as something to potentially explore.
Yeah, I would like it looked at as something to potentially explore, to allow, in a limited way, like not to have, 50 chickens in a tiny backyard, but, I think that other municipalities are dealing with it in a responsible way, and we can look to see best practices.
Okay, thank you. And for Councillor Fernandez had mentioned about community centres shifting to more staff-run programs, and it wasn't clear to me as whether that's a problem or an opportunity.
Councillor Fernandez.
I think it's I don't know if it's a problem necessarily, but I think that some community associations are feeling that staff is overriding what the neighborhood association really, what their mandate is, what their desire is, and what they're hearing from their community members. And so the partnership or the scales, the balance has shifted a little bit. I think we need to balance it back where it should be.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, thank you very much for all that, and I'll turn it over to Lori to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you all for your great ideas, and so now we have to figure out what to do with all these ideas. So by Friday, which is the day after tomorrow, we will provide a list of all of the ideas generated through the strategy session today to you, and we'll group like things together, so there were a lot of common themes, so see how many ideas we have. Feed them back to all of you to prioritize them. So we'll do that through an electronic survey, if you're all comfortable with that. And if anyone has a concern, we can certainly give you a paper to work with as well. But something that you can do online to just tell us of all of the ideas that were generated, in what order you would prioritize them, so that we can get a sense of, what are the things that are most commonly rising to the surface in this group, and what are some of the things that maybe can wait or are less important. So you'll have a week to do that prioritization, and that'll give us about 3 days to pull that together and do a quick high-level assessment of what the impact of following through on those priorities might be. So we need to look at what staff would need to be involved to move those initiatives forward, how much capacity they have to work on these kinds of things, and some of the other initiatives that might need to be deferred or delayed or canceled in order to make room for those. And we'll bring that information forward to you on December 8th. So we'll need to write the staff report and get it to clerks, I think, by the 27th or 28th. So we don't have a lot of time between now and then. But, so the first thing will be for you to prioritize. We'll do a high-level assessment of what that might mean, bring this back to you so you can see the results of that, and look to you as council for some direction on how to move forward in the business plan with those things. With that information, we'll prepare a draft business plan by allocating resources to those initiatives and figuring out, what stays and what goes and how quickly we can move on things in 2015. We will submit that plan for council review on January 8th, and there'll be a meeting on January 19th of the Finance and Corporate Services Committee for you to provide feedback on that. Typically then what happens is when the budget comes forward, there is also a recommendation to approve the business plan at the same time the budget is approved, because there may be implications of budget decisions that impact our ability to move forward on the business plan, so we make those adjustments in sync with the budget. So those are our next steps. Any questions or...
So there is one, but just before I go to Councillor Galloway-Selak, I guess the one question, before you have us prioritizing this stuff, would it not make sense for staff to identify, or is this where you're going with it? Okay, well, I'll let you go ahead and raise it. Go ahead, Councillor Galloway-Selak.
It's okay. It may not be exactly where I was going, but I was going to ask if there was any merit in having senior staff look at the list once you've put it together to see what, because there's likely some ideas there that are already being addressed by, through the neighborhood strategy or other things like that, or for even some of the quick wins or easy wins that they know won't take many staff resources that they can incorporate easily into the work plan before we prioritize, because I fear we're going to end up with 100 things to prioritize, and some of the smaller things aren't going to end up high on the radar, which is fine, but they may be able to be accomplished still. Is that part of your plan, even if it means we don't get the list until early next week? Because I don't know if we all need a week to go through it, but I would rather have staff go through it first, weed out some of the things that can be or are already being accomplished, and then we can prioritize from there.
Yeah, I see Mr. Wilmer wants to chime in, and just before he does, I'll say I tend to sort of share those thoughts that I think would be helpful to have staff take an initial look at it, because I think a bunch of these things are, quite frankly, already in the work plan.
That's an excellent suggestion. We plan to start that this afternoon.
Wow.
See what happens when we give them 45 extra minutes in the meeting?
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, quickly to that, and I understand the...
Oh, sorry, hold on. I clicking again. I clicked the wrong person off.
No. It's great for that suggestion. I think I can understand the effectiveness of that, but I would just caution that you use the word weeding out. I think, if nothing else, a comment attached to it, just so that if some suggestion was put forward by any particular council member, that they will have opportunity to clarify if perhaps there's something additional that they want to elaborate to. We wouldn't want to see that any suggestion being taken completely off the table without some rediscussion on that. At least that way they can connect with staff offline.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think the intent of the direction is not for staff to do any weeding or anything, but simply to say if some things are already on the work plan that we may not be aware of, then we don't need to prioritize it because it's already going to happen.
Yep, and that's what I expected, but I just wanted to make sure that some comments are attached to that so we can see that individually.
Okay. So if there is, Mr. Wilmer.
So I want to thank council and especially Lori and Jen for facilitating this session. I have to say, after spending most of the last 25 years involved with councils of one day or another, I can't ever remember a session that was as uplifting as this one, where we had the council members saying, this is what I want to do to make this a better community. And it's not just because we ended with the neighborhood one, although I think that's a big part of it, that we finished on a high note as, what can we do to improve quality of life? But I think the conversation throughout the day really was positive and productive as to this is a great community. It can be an even better community. Here's what we want to do to make that happen. So I have to, just wanted to share that with council. Thank you for putting your minds to it and for representing your constituents so well.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments, and I think equal thanks goes to staff for looking at finding ways to have this session happen early in the process, even before the new council is sworn in, because I think it indicates the level of partnership and cooperation that needs to exist between council and staff to make things happen. And I certainly found this to be a very helpful session, and I think will set us on a good path going forward for the balance of this term. Wonderful. So with that, motion to adjourn. Councillor Fernandez, sorry? Oh, do we need to do bylaws? Not for this, or special council? Yeah? Okay. Okay, sorry. So moved by, bylaws moved by Councillor Fernandez, seconded by Councillor Singh. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Did I miss something?
She can't say.
Why? Oh, okay. So pick somebody else. Councillor Ioannidis.